Our heroine opened her eyes with difficulty. The girl was told that she had to get married. She sat on the floor holding her head, and collecting her thoughts, she tried to understand what had happened to her. Ruin Han-Xing's father told her that she grew up in the slums without much education. But she didn't listen and wanted to walk away. The blonde hurried to the mirror and began to examine herself in the reflection. She concluded that she had returned to the past. Ruin Wen-Si, the youngest daughter of the family, stood up for her father. She said that her sister had just woken up. She assumed that she harbored a grudge in her heart. The blonde burst in quickly and asked what kind of education they were talking about. If anyone didn't know, Ruan Han-Xing had a mother, but no father, and the girl asked her father his opinion on this matter. Almost immediately after the birth, our heroine's mother died. After all, her father's mistress came to her mother right before the birth. As a result of their communication, the pregnant woman began bleeding. The widower did not particularly grieve, and soon he married the same mistress. And 3 months later she gave birth to our heroine Wei-Shi's half-sister. As for Ruin Han-Shi, she was sent to live with her maternal grandmother. And the two of them lived in poverty all those years, forced to collect trash. But 20 years later, Ruin Ji-Qing suddenly came to his eldest daughter, and her life turned into hell. The father beat and scolded the girl for her bad manners. The man raised his hand over his daughter, but she deftly intercepted it, avoiding a beating. Khan said that while she lived in the slums, she learned how to stand up for herself. Here the stepmother intervened. She reminded our heroine that her own father stood before her, and he was worth listening to. And that guy was from a very rich family and was known to be quite quiet. The girl took her hand away from her stepmother, but she said that Khan should have been grateful for the opportunity to improve her life. The stepdaughter asked why they had not married Wei-Sin in that case, and she reminded him that she herself was uneducated and rather unrestrained. The prospective groom was the middle son of the Ho family. The guy had an accident 6 months ago, and miraculously survived. He was left disabled in a wheelchair. The bride's side did not dare to break the marriage contract, but at the same time they did not want to give away their precious daughter, and they offered the eldest one as a bride. In her past life, Khan refused to marry a cripple. Then our heroine chose the second son of the Ho family as her husband. He later cheated on his wife, and then the girl died with her grandmother in an accident. She had been wrong before, but now she wanted to protect her loved ones. Faye asked her sister reproachfully how she could do such a thing. After all, her parents were older, but Khan advised the younger one to keep quiet too. The girl was sure that mother and daughter were similar, an old maid who presented herself as innocence, and the other, a mercenary fool. The woman clung to her husband for support. He angrily asked his eldest daughter who could love her like that, and he assured her that marriage to Ho was her only chance. The heroine decided to take advantage of the moment and set the conditions: a house in an elite area and $1 million in cash. This made the father furious, but his wife began to persuade him to give the girl what she asked for. Khan said that this was where their agreement ended, and she ordered them to leave quickly so as not to catch Grandma's eye and upset her. The old woman ran into Ji Qin at the door and was surprised to see him there. The girl's eyes were full of tears. She was very attached to her grandmother and loved her. After all, the woman had always been there all these years, and essentially raised her and was instead of a mother. Han hurried to share the good news that Ruin Ji-Qing had promised to buy them an apartment and give them a lot of money to boot. But Grandma saw the catch, that something was given so easily. The woman reminded her granddaughter of young Master Ho. He was a handsome and rich man. With such a rich husband, she should just enjoy life. Khan asked him to stop talking nonsense and reminded him that she had already made a promise. Turning around, she gave orders that all her things be moved after she got married. A few days later, our heroine arrived at the huge mansion of the Huo family. The car stopped right at the gate. Determined, Khan opened the car door and stepped out. At the entrance, the guest was met by a helpful butler. He took the girl's things and politely invited her to come into the house. Once inside, Han took off her glasses and began to look around the interior. The servant led her to the master's room and told her that he had not left it for several days. Our heroine loudly asked permission to enter and opened the door to the guy's room. A handsome but sad guy sat silently in the carriage. Khan greeted him and assured him that they should have gotten to know each other better. The young man shouted, ordering the guest to leave in a rude manner. But she, smiling sweetly, assured him that they were now one family. Therefore, it was worth getting to know her better. And Khan asked permission to introduce herself once more. She opened the curtains by the window, and having given her full name, she declared that she would now be his wife. The guy assured that he didn't need a wife, but the girl asked him not to worry, and she assured him that although he couldn't be there in person, she had already received their marriage certificate. Khan claimed that legally they were already married. The young man said that if she came for money, there was enough of it. He handed over a bank card and assured her that the funds should be enough for her to live a carefree life. The girl was surprised and asked again. Khan assured that she had been interested in investments for some time, and she was thinking of borrowing money from her husband for this. But since he himself gave her the card, over time she would split the profits with her husband in half. The young man was indifferent to this. He asked the guest not to talk and not to disturb him. Khan assured that her husband would not be disappointed if he invested in her. Their conversation was interrupted by the butler. He said that the master's third brother had fought with someone at school, and now they had burst into the house and were demanding an apology. The girl thought about it. She knew that the Huo family had many children, but the only support for her crippled husband was Huo Zhengshuan, and she didn't want the offenders to leave without causing problems. Resolutely taking the bat from the butler's hands, Han assured that she would go and sort it out herself, since she had been a member of this family for some time now. The guys below were arguing. The opponent asked Huo Jiner why he was so mad. After all, it was true that his brother was crippled, and he didn't understand what he said was bad. Wu Yi assured him that if he apologized to him right now, he would be forgiven. He couldn't understand why Huo Jinshuan was so stubborn. The young man had a bruise on his cheek. He cursed. Khan went down the stairs, and in a stern, loud voice she asked the young men who had allowed them to cause a commotion in someone else's house. The boys turned their heads in bewilderment in the direction of the voice. The girl with a stern look said that she was the daughter-in-law, but Huo Jin did not want her to interfere and control him. Ruin didn't like the way the boy spoke to her and swung the bat. The boys were scared. Ho Jin took his words back. The girl waited to hear an apology. The assistant wrote down about the repairs in the house. Master Ho asked what the noise was in the house. A man from the Wu family stood at the door. The assistant hinted that the mistress was not in the mood. This did not stop the mister. He could not tolerate disrespect for his family. Renier made it clear to the man that he needed to educate the youth. Wu decided that this applied to him too. He came closer to the girl and admitted that the beauty was right. Renier did not like his behavior, but at that moment Ho and his assistant entered the room. The master decided to also take part in the upbringing of the younger generation. Wu did not want to seem rude, and said that the elder brother should educate the younger one. Mr. Ho asked his assistant to bring his strict wife a bat and let her continue. Rainier found the master very funny. Wu imagined his younger son as being very naughty. The girl suggested that he deal with him himself. The boy didn't expect such an answer. Renier saw that he felt sorry for his brother. It was something else. Wu asked his assistant to change the bat. Young Wu wanted to run away from his mad brother, but his brother continued to educate him. The young man was waiting for salvation. Mr. wanted the younger one to do less stupid things and apologize to Madame immediately. Renier was waiting for Mr. Wu to calm down so she could talk to him. Huo Jin hid behind the master. He was shocked by the girl's behavior. Senior Wu apologized to the lady for his expressions in education. Ruin said that everything was fine now and the Wu boys could go. The girl was happy that her husband supported her. The girl came closer to her husband. She reminded him that the younger brother had not been punished yet. But Mr. Ho did not care. Jin Xuan did not like how the woman began to educate him. Khan still held the bat tightly. The blonde made it clear to the boy that she was the elder and he should listen to her like a mother. The young lady hit the boy sharply. The first blow came for not being able to stand up for the Ho family and letting strangers into the house. The second was for disrespecting his elders and for bad behavior. The assistant felt sorry for the guy. Han brought the guy to his senses that he needed to solve the problem differently. The girl calmed Jin Xuan down and they went to have lunch. The guy was getting used to the idea of having a family. Han threatened to hit him on the head. The assistant told Mr. Ho that his wife had raised the boy, for which he was not angry with her. But the master did not expect this from Han. The girl went into Ho Xiao's room to take him for lunch, but her husband had no desire to eat or accept her help. Khan's husband seemed capricious like a child. She insisted on eating together, and assured him that he would have to get used to it. And he did not like that his wife spoke to him as if he were a child. Huo Jin was surprised when he saw his brother in the kitchen and without bad habits. He thought that he had been beaten too. Khan asked where her sister was. The assistant said that she was having lunch at home. The mistress ordered to wait for another brother, and she would call her sister-in-law. The heroine knew about the Ho family, that there were many of them, and that the younger sister was a difficult child. Khan came to the door and heard the sound of the piano. A young lady was sitting at the instrument. The girl opened the door and heard a restrained phrase asking her to leave the room. Our heroine came closer to Xiao Ning, wanting to get acquainted, and asked what she was performing. But the lady's reaction was completely incomprehensible. The memories haunted her. A stocky man was brutally beating a small, fragile girl. A woman was screaming furiously that the lady would never live the same again. The girl was saved from the enemy of the family. After all, she is now an orphan and Mrs. Ho took her in, no matter how big their family is. People did not believe in the talent of the young lady and considered her a simpleton. They slandered that she was not worthy of playing famous compositions, and so she was overcome with despair. The lady heard Han playing familiar notes and was surprised that it was Swan. The girl knew a small part and asked Xiao Ning to teach her to play more. Khan liked the golden-haired girl's performance, but she heard notes of pain in her performance and wanted to help. The lady was touched by the fact that they became a family. The two girls walked down the stairs together. The brothers were shocked to see their sister in tears. Huo Jin thought she had been beaten up too. The youngest one came home from school. Han was glad that almost the entire family was gathered for a shared meal. She sent Ho Chung to wash her hands. Ho Jin was afraid for his brother, that he would be beaten. He suddenly jumped up and ran after him. The girl was convinced once again that there were only children in this family. Master Ho was surprised that they were all going to have lunch together. He reminded himself that he should be the one in the spotlight. The next morning in the huge mansion promised to be eventful. Han ate breakfast and reflected on how her new life was going smoothly. Ho Chen rushed to school. The girl showed concern, which pleasantly surprised the boy. Khan said that he needed milk for strength and growth, and if he didn't like it, she could replace it with soy milk. The boy drank it and thanked his daughter-in-law. The girl also made sure Xiao Ning had a healthy breakfast. The middle brother also wanted attention. Ho Jin's phone rang. A stranger was inviting the guy to go somewhere. Suddenly, he refused the girl. The young man was embarrassed in front of his daughter-in-law. She decided to teach the teenager a lesson and offered him a gift. The boy was stunned by the offer. The daughter-in-law began handing out lunch to everyone. She even prepared a box for her husband. The master was grateful for the care. Ho handed the promised gift to the young man. He briefly thanked the girl. The Western District looked gloomy and gray. Khan came to visit her grandmother. The girl was happily spinning and showing her new outfits. The old woman was glad that her granddaughter was not being offended in the rich man's new family. Khan promised to introduce the grandmother to her husband soon. Suddenly, a female voice was heard. Shen Nan, the heroine's childhood friend, had arrived, and she and her grandmother went to prepare dinner. Khan saw her old friend with bad company through the window. Because of them, the girl got married in a hurry, left the slums and left communication with them. Due to poverty, Shen Nan went into show business. And when she had a miscarriage, the girl wanted to commit suicide. Xiao Bai's friend was in a gang. He served several years for a crime. Han ran away from her grandmother into the street. A tall guy was standing under the house with a cigarette in his hand. The girl shouted menacingly at Xiao Bai not to smoke. One guy from the group spoke rudely to Han. The girl asked Brother Li to avoid her friend. Another disgruntled guy from the group shouted and pointed his finger at Han. The girl didn't like it. She grabbed the boar's finger sharply. Khan kicked him in the stomach with all her might. The fragile-looking girl snatched the bat. Khan deftly threw everyone aside. The guys couldn't understand why she was doing this to them. Having threatened them, the girl went to call the police. Khan threatened the boy with physical violence. She advised him to study, and sternly instructed him that nothing good would come of associating with bad guys. The blonde returned to her luxurious mansion with a bag in her hands. All the household members met her at the entrance. The boys thought that Khan had brought snacks for everyone, but these were the remains of their grandmother's lunch. The girl suggested that everyone try them. The children were happy with the offer. Only Mr. Ho refused, looking sternly at his wife from under his forehead. The girl realized that he was pretending. She decided to cook for her husband herself. Mr. Ho was embarrassed in front of his family. There was a loud knock at the door. Han couldn't guess who it was. They brought a luxurious bouquet. At the door, Han saw a tall guy with flowers. Mr. Wu brought thanks for helping with her upbringing. The missus refused the bouquet. The young man began to play to the crowd. He gave worthless compliments. Han was seething from what she heard. The girl did not want to get into the newspapers because of the bouquet. The self-confident Mr. Wu invited the missus to dinner. The sound of a carriage was heard in the hallway. Master Ho offered to join him for dinner. Han didn't recognize her husband. She proudly accepted the proposal. The girl said goodbye to Mr. Wu. Wu felt humiliated. He was defeated by a loving couple. Master Ho asked the girl to tell him about such situations. He went to his room. The blonde was pleased to hear this. In the evening, Khan knocked on her husband's door. She came to thank him for his help. The girl held his medicine on a tray. Ho angrily asked to leave the medicine. The girl doubted whether he would drink it. The man looked menacingly at his wife. Han screamed sharply. Her husband was shaking violently. She was so scared that she couldn't understand what was wrong with him. The assistant came running to the scream. He told her to give the gentleman medicine immediately. Khan read the names of the pills. She was shocked at how this medicine worked. Her husband had been taking the wrong medication all along and could have harmed himself with it. The blonde held her husband's hand. She wanted to help him find the right solution to the problem. After all, she was sure that dependence on the drug would lead to bad consequences. The girl promised to help with the right treatment. She was very sincere with her husband at that moment. After all, he was the support of the whole family. The assistant was perplexed. Why were the drugs addictive? After all, the mister was treated by the country's excellent doctors. Mr. Ho told the story in a tired voice. The doctors had given him a final diagnosis, which he had accepted. He took painkillers without thinking about the consequences. Those people were only interested in money. Khan assumed that the test results were incorrect. She knew a good clinic in the eastern part of the city. The girl temptingly offered her husband to spend time together. To Ho's surprise, he accepted the offer. The assistant was sincerely happy for the gentleman. On a sunny morning, the car was already at the exit near the forged gates. Khan and her husband were ready to go. And suddenly, somehow, the young people appeared near the car. The younger brothers and sister wanted to go with them too. They behaved like little children who had been forgotten. Khan politely promised to take them another time. The couple was already driving on a busy highway in a mad stream of cars. They were chatting nicely on various topics. The girl wanted to know more about his loved ones. Suddenly, Han noticed a suspicious car in her rearview mirror. She was not happy that they were being followed. Mr. said that it was Chen Ming's cousin. The cousin was the acting director. After the accident, he became a serious problem for Ho. But Khan didn't care who he was or what family he was from. The girl was confident in herself. No one could stop her from taking her beloved to the doctor. The blonde put her foot on the gas pedal and the car sped off at breakneck speed. Mr. Ho didn't understand what she was doing. Khan went for a sharp overtake. She deftly overtook the cars in front. Soon they had already broken away from their pursuer. The couple arrived at a large clinic. Mr. was a little sick after Khan's extreme driving. The doctor determined after the examination that everything was quite curable. He assured that after a small operation and proper treatment, the patient would be able to walk. He just had to stick to regular tests. Ho really liked what he heard. But still the doctor was very perplexed. It was possible to come earlier in order to avoid progression of the disease. After all, the tests were not expensive at any doctor. Mr. Ho did not like the doctor's statement. He was sure that money does not decide everything these days. A nurse came into the office with Mr. Ho's drug results. The doctor explained the negative side effects of the drug. That's why the man had been depressed lately. Khan assumed that this was the reason for her husband's suicide in his past life. But she didn't care what happened or how. The girl only wanted to protect her beloved. Mr. Ho took his wife's arms and consoled her. He assured her that he was perfectly fine. The girl was surprised by his calmness. Han gently hugged her husband around the neck. The main thing for her was to start treatment. The girl wanted to see the man healthy. Ho reciprocated by placing his hand on hers. At this time, each of them had their own thoughts in their heads. They became close to each other. Soon, the doctor sent the couple of excited patients to pay for the consultation. On the way back home, the couple stopped at a shopping mall. They needed to buy something to throw off attention. Khan was meticulously choosing a tie for her husband. Mr. Ho was not happy with the fitting. He grabbed the lady's hand sharply and forcefully. The man did not like the girl's excessive closeness. Having calmed down, the man chose one of the proposed options. Khan calmly agreed with the choice. Mr. was amazed at her balance. In the sales room, an unfamiliar girl called Mr. Ho brother. The man did not want to see anyone. Pink-haired Chen Yi was indignant at being ignored. She knew about the doctor's visit. The blonde guessed that the young lady was from the Chen family. Han had a very interesting idea. The girl left her husband for a while. Han approached the young lady with a request. She modestly introduced herself and asked for help in finding the cosmetics department. Chen Yi, without showing her hostility, agreed to help. She decided to put a spanner in the works for the blonde. The pink-haired woman suggested Khan a provocative lipstick. She was very convincing, and she assured that it was the most popular shade of the new season, and she whispered conspiratorially in her ear that, given her past, it was not surprising that the girl did not know about the latest fashion trends of the season. Without thinking twice, Han grabbed the impudent person tightly just below the wrist. The acid-colored lipstick immediately flew to the side. Taking the ill-fated lipstick in her hands, our heroine decided to take action against the offender. And she declared that she also thought that this shade was supposedly quite beautiful, suggesting that she apply it first. Khan forcibly applied the lipstick offered to her to the girl's lips. She, trembling with her whole body, begged him to let her go. The girl said with a sly grin that she would not offend her husband's sister, and she would give her this lipstick. Han handed the card to the salesperson. She said that all these cosmetics would be paid for by the Ho family. Chen sat on the floor with lipstick smeared on her face, somewhat confused, and to herself she was making threats against the bold and daring person. The assistant reported about Director Ho, that he had appeared in public for the first time since the car accident. Today, he had been shopping at the mall with his wife and had been quite generous. The guy angrily threw the magazine on the floor. He was scolding Secretary Zhao for not paying his son, a doctor, so that his brother could coo with his wife in public. He assured that if Ho Chen stood in his way, they would be the first to get into trouble. Then the phone rang. The girl screamed into the receiver that this Ruan Han Xin was a real shrew, because she dared to humiliate her in public. The young man assured the subscriber that the woman was just a woman from the slums, and could not believe that she could behave like that among the upper class. And he assured her that the time would come when the girl would be able to take full revenge on her. At that time, Ho Chen was a newcomer to the business world. And once he made his move, the family's assets increased several times. In high society, everyone called the guy Mr. Ho, and no one dared to go against him. However, it so happened that the young man broke his leg in an accident. And ever since then, he has been depressed. And the other became acting director and was able to pave the way for a bright future. And before the Chen family could take over the entire business, he needed to overthrow him. And since Huo's wife was so ignorant, it was worth starting with her. So he decided to wait for the girl to appear at the Gu family banquet. Khan handed out bags to the children, who immediately rushed to surround her. She announced that they could find snacks, clothes, and trinkets specially bought for them. The servant handed over an envelope and told Madame that Mr. Gu had sent a rare orchid with an invitation to their banquet. Khan was a little tense. She was afraid that his relatives might have something bad planned. Her husband assured that he was physically unable to go, and he stated that the girl would go there on behalf of the whole family. Han replied that since everything had already been decided, she could take one of the younger ones with her to congratulate Mr. Gu. And she admitted that she was still thinking about who she should choose. The children began praising themselves in turn. All three expressed a desire to accompany Khan to the event, and no one was going to back down. The argument continued, and our heroine, unable to bear it, gave in. She announced that she would take them all with her. The children were pleased and happy. In the Gu family's banquet hall, guests were chatting and drinking in a dignified manner. It seemed like all the famous people had gathered there. The pink-haired girl asked Qian, Huo Chen's elder sister, if her sister-in-law would also come today. She muttered that she didn't have a sister-in-law. The girl replied that it was unlikely that anyone would want an unknown person to become a relative. And it was surprising that the brother married someone from the slums with low origins. The friend said that she was ashamed to even mention this person in front of others. After all, she behaved provocatively. And to top it off, she crossed Mr. Wu's path, and she believed that it was not worth turning a blind eye to the past. The arrival of Mrs. Ho was announced, and they invited her to come up to greet her. The pink-haired girl, squinting her eyes, informed Qian that her daughter-in-law had arrived. 4 people appeared at the entrance, 2 guys and a girl. Khan walked ahead, leading her husband's family. The girl looked beautiful in a scarlet lush dress with snow-white frills. Their family had not attended this kind of banquet for a long time. The friend asked Qian how she judged the newcomer. It was surprising that with such a face, She wanted to get into the circle of the rich and powerful. The pink-haired girl was surprised that the girl was not afraid to climb high and break into pieces. Qian in response noted that the girl's gaze and aura were interesting. This infuriated the friend. She asked him to repeat what he had said, and asked if she agreed that this person was her daughter-in-law. Qian said that she was not interested in this at all, and turning to leave she said that she would go get some fresh air. The malicious girl decided to make trouble for her since her friend was not on her side. Han sipped from a glass of superbly bouqueted red wine. She thought to herself that this banquet had turned out to be grander than she had imagined. Suddenly, there was a sound of a broken vase and splashing water. Turning around, the guests saw a flower lying on the floor. Everyone started asking what had happened. It was just awful that Mr. Gu's orchid had fallen to the floor with its vase and was damaged. Someone shouted that Qian had done this. Our heroine turned around in search of the culprit. She herself did not know that the fourth child of the Ho family had returned to her homeland. Surprised and indignant voices were heard all around. Everyone began to discuss how this family could have violated etiquette in such a way when they came to visit. On the floor in a puddle of water lay a rare orchid flower. Around it lay fragments of a broken vase. People used to say that there was only one species of double-petal orchid in the world, called the crown orchid. Rumor had it that someone had once offered $1 billion for it. Confusion and surprise were evident on Qian's face. She was sure that someone had pushed her. Because of this, she lost her balance and hit a vase with a rare flower. Mr. Gu was furious at what was happening. He immediately ordered Miss Ho to be escorted out of the room. This powerful man decided that the Gu family would never invite the Ho family to their events again. Qian was confused. She asked for forgiveness and claimed that her family was not to blame. The girl said that she was truly sorry that everything happened this way. There were tears in her eyes. The guests at the banquet gathered around a broken vase and a flower on the floor. The head of the Gu family announced that they would publicly declare war on the Huo family. The question hung in the air as to whether this would change the balance of power in the city. People whispered and discussed what Ho Chen might do. They said that he did not know how to defend himself, and his brothers and sisters had to endure such humiliation. Chen Yi smiled wickedly and spoke sarcastically to Qian, asking if she realized how much trouble she had caused now. The girl laughed loudly, happy that the Huo family would be disgraced. The treacherous Chen Yi stood behind Qian and said that her ignorance made her helpless. Suddenly, a hand fell on Chen Yi's shoulder, and a voice calmly asked if she wanted to turn around. Chen Yi froze, wondering who it could be. Suddenly, a sharp slap sounded. It was Ruin Han. She stood behind Chen Yi and slapped her in the face. Chen Yi fell to the floor, covering her face with her hands, and indignantly asked why she was hit. She insisted that Qian was to blame. Ruin Han folded her arms and asked sternly why Chen Yi was gloating when her sister was in trouble. She reminded him that the Huo and Chen families used to be so friendly. Frowning and not changing her posture, the girl loudly ordered Chen Yi to apologize to Qian. Huo Chen's younger sister was surprised by her sister-in-law's behavior. There was a silent question in her eyes. However, Chen Yi indignantly asked why Ruin Han hit her in front of everyone and why she had to apologize. Her words were filled with despair and hatred. Standing up from her knees, Huo Chen's cousin angrily shouted at Ruin Han, declaring that she would never forgive her, and tried to attack her with her fists. Standing face to face with this furious fury, Ruin Han calmly noted that the Huo family had always treated the Chen family with respect. She recalled that even after the terrible accident in which Ho Chen suffered, the future of the family was entrusted to Chen Yi's brother. Ruan Han asked if Chen Ming knew how meanly his sister treated her loved ones. The blow came unexpectedly. Ruan Han's graceful foot in a fashionable shoe with a precise movement hit the face of the vile Chen Yi. Kneeling down and trembling all over, Chen Yi quietly whispered requests for forgiveness towards Qian. Ruan Han looked at her with disdain and mockingly asked why Miss Chen had suddenly become so quiet. Maybe she was hungry, or maybe she had a sore throat. The girl even suggested calling a doctor, pleased with her resourcefulness. Hatred filled Chen Yi's heart. She gritted her teeth and whispered malicious words towards Ruan Han. Qian, standing over Chen Yi who was kneeling, suddenly asked her to forgive her foolish sister. Suddenly, the sound of a cane hitting the floor echoed throughout the hall, and everyone froze. The head of the Gu family attracted the guests' attention. He declared that since the Huo family's problem had been resolved, they should leave, as his house was too small for everyone. Ruin Han remembered at this moment how in her previous life, the people from the Ju family taught her how to take care of orchids. She tried to please the Gu family. She remembered how after the Ju family had completely displaced the Huo family, she had become unnecessary and had been disposed of. But now she is the madam of the Huo family, and she has a chance to make things right. Ruin Han made a request to Mr. Gu, assuring him that her younger children were well-behaved and obedient. The host of the banquet replied that he believed in her abilities, but it was the Ho family that should bear responsibility for this incident. The girl agreed with his remark and assured that their family would correct their mistake. She squatted down, picked up the delicate flower and looked into Mr. Gu's eyes, asking for 3 months to revive the orchid. If she failed, the Huo family would pay compensation. Mr. Gu looked down at her with confusion. Suddenly, a young man's voice suggested giving Ruin Han a chance. He said that if she was so bold, let her try. The eldest man of the Gu family looked at his grandson and agreed, giving the girl 3 months. Ruin Han recognized the young man as the doctor they had visited recently, and was surprised that he was from the Gu family. After sincerely thanking Mr. Gu, the girl asked him to check the video surveillance. One question was bothering her. She wondered who dared to humiliate her family like that. Chen Yi suddenly shouted that Ruin Han could go and watch the recordings if she wanted. Ruin Han grabbed her chin, looked deeply into her eyes and asked why she was so excited. Wasn't it her who pushed Qianqian? Chen Yi began to make excuses, shouting that her cousin was standing too close to the orchid and anyone could have pushed her. Qianqian frowned and asked how Chen Yi knew that she was standing on tiptoe. After all, one had to be there to see it. She couldn't believe that her cousin would do such a mean thing. Her eyes were full of reproach and disappointment. The guests whispered, condemning Chen Yi's behavior. Everyone agreed that she was the culprit of the incident. Many began to sympathize with the Ho family, realizing how unlucky they were with their relatives. Chen Yi tried to justify herself by saying that she had only twisted her ankle. When Ruin Han and Qianqian came closer, she screamed at them not to touch her because she had already been beaten. The girls looked at her angrily and said that this was not the end. It was just the beginning. Ruin Han came very close and suggested that Qianqian give Chen Yi another slap so that she would remember this lesson forever. The girl angrily clenched her teeth and said that she was the fourth lady of the Huo family. She accused Chen of wanting to turn everything upside down. The young master gave orders not to invite Miss Chen Yi to the Gu family's banquets anymore. He declared that this house was no longer happy to see her. The girl realized that it was all over for her. The ladies surrounded Mrs. Ho and began to admire her with all their voices. They even asked her to share the secret of her beauty, agility, and courage. Then the sounds of the piano were heard, and only then did the girls remember that Lady Yu Wang was going to attend the banquet in order to recruit talented and promising students. The blonde snuggled up to Ruin Han. The teenager was clearly delighted, her eyes shining. The guests began to whisper. They said that the fifth lady of the Huo family liked to play the piano. They thought that the girl should be given the opportunity to take a test, so that Madame Yu Wang would accept her as a student. The little girl was clearly shy, and her sister began to stand up for her, and threatened that sister-in-law Han could get to them too. But the girls sincerely said that this could be a chance for the fifth miss to prove herself. The girls asked if they would be accepted as students too. The interlocutor suggested that the young talent play on stage, expressing hope that she would not tremble and cry like a little girl. Han answered for the girl. She asked if Mrs. Yu would accept as her disciples those who were better than others at belittling others. Mrs. Yu Wang touched the keys of the musical instrument. She said with a smile that useless arguments only spoiled the music. She said that everyone had a chance to perform on stage today, and she herself was going to enjoy the sounds of the piano and evaluate the performers as an ordinary listener. And turning to the frightened girl, she asked if the young lady wanted to perform today. One of the guests said that she did not believe that this talentless girl was capable of anything. Han supported the little girl by holding her hands, and asked Xiao Ning not to be nervous, promising to accompany her to the stage. She said that she believed in her talent and ability in music. Soon our heroine led young Xiao Ning to the musical instrument. The girl sat down at the piano without raising her gaze to the guests. Ruin Han asked not to look at anyone and not to pay attention to the reaction, and to see only the keys and play according to her emotions. After all, the rest was not important. Xiao Ning touched the keys, and the melody flowed. It seemed that the girl had merged with the instrument and lived each note with her heart. There were murmurs of approval in the hall. Someone declared that the girl played quite well, as expected from Lady Ho. And the slender fingers played the keys of the instrument, continuing to envelop those present in enchanting sounds. Xiao Ning seemed to forget that she was under the scrutinizing gaze of so many unfamiliar people during her performance. She simply gave in to her emotions and enjoyed the moment of merging with beauty. The composition ended. The performer lifted her hands from the keys. The guests applauded enthusiastically. Mrs. Yu Wang assured the girl that she was the most talented pianist she had ever met. She offered the young lady to become her student. Xiao Ning happily accepted. That evening in the Ho mansion, relatives once again admired the baby. The middle brother was the one who screamed the most with delight, and he asked Ruan Han to allow him to drink alcohol today as an exception. The sister quietly entered Mr. Ho. She did not dare to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. Her brother scolded her severely and reproached her for not being able to distinguish who was faithful to her and who was a traitor. He advised her not to hope that Ruan Han's daughter-in-law would protect her for the rest of her life. The girl only lowered her eyes in shame. The door opened. His wife came in. She came to Mr. Ho and accidentally overheard his conversation with his sister. The girl was pleased with herself, and it seemed that she was all aglow. She assured that of course she would hardly be able to protect his brothers and sisters for the rest of her life. The husband asked if Ruan Han was being too protective of them, but she assured him that not only were they her family, but he was too, and that she wanted to protect him too. Mr. Ho took his wife's hand and pulled her towards him. The girl lost her balance and fell on him, and she heard him reproach her for treating him like a child. Ho, looking into her eyes, reminded her that he was not only an adult man, but also her husband. He sat Khan on his lap and said that she was bossy with him, even though she had no right to educate him. The girl decided to play along a little. She asked her husband not to tire himself out too much. Chen, who entered, interrupted the couple's moment. From the door, she informed her daughter-in-law that the orchid had become very ill. The flower was fading, but she couldn't tell what was wrong with it. Han concluded that despite her experience, she had made a mistake. Chen, with a worried expression on her face, assured that she had simply come to see how the plant was doing, but had not at all expected that something like this could happen. Khan hugged her and began to calm the girl down, and asked her not to worry, assuring her that she would find a way to help the flower. Our heroine decided to go to her grandfather and ask him for an ancient book on caring for orchids. Outside, someone at the door said that they wanted to see Han Xin's sister and asked where she could be found. The servant told Mr. Ho that the young man at the door had asked for Madame, but she was not at home at the moment. He ordered the young man to be led into the house. The guest who entered had bright, noticeable hair. He sat down timidly. Master Ho asked in a cold tone why he was looking for his wife. The boy answered without restraint that if Han Xin entered the Huo family as a daughter-in-law, she still had the right to meet with old friends. The owner of the house assured that his wife had gone to the Western District in the morning, and he promised to pass on his words if anything happened upon her return home. The young man was horrified that Han Xin had gone to the bad area herself, and he was sure that Brother Li would certainly want to take revenge on the impudent Ruan Han. Ho, perplexed, asked what was going on. The guest briefly and confusedly told that not long ago, in order to punish him, Han beat up Li's brother and sent him to the police station. The husband decided to immediately go in search of his wife. It was already getting dark over the Western District. Our heroine walked down the street in thought. She couldn't understand why the book she needed had disappeared, and she assumed that the butterfly effect might have worked. Suddenly, the girl's name was called. Han Xin was surprised to see her husband and her friend together. The young man anxiously asked if she was okay. The girl answered with a counter-question about why Ho Chen was with him. In her hands, she noticed the book she had been looking for so long. The friend assured that he had heard about the story with the orchid. So he went to his grandfather and took the book especially for Han Xing. The blonde took the book in her hands and assured that it was exactly what she was looking for here. Ruan Han thanked the young man, and she realized why her grandfather was so irritated when she came and started asking about the book. Suddenly, the company heard the barking of stray dogs. Soon the pack of aggressive animals was already dangerously close. The young man shouted at Han Xing to be careful. He instinctively grabbed his friend's hand tightly and tried to cover her with his body. Han Xing's husband was emotional, but the girl's friend began to assure her that she was afraid of dogs, and he assured her that in childhood, when dogs chased them, he was the one who always stood up for her. Huo Chen was surprised because they were just stray dogs. But now that Han was living in the Huo family, it was unacceptable for her to go through that again. Xiao Bai assured that even though he was not as good as the Huo family, he still intended to help Sister Han Xin with all his might. The girl patted her friend on the head and he immediately softened. He said that he had delivered the book and Han Xin's sister was fine, so he was leaving already. When the young man left, Huo Chen guessed that his wife was quite close to him. The girl replied that she grew up with Xiao Bai and Shang Nian, and so they were like one family. Han Xin approached the end wall of one of the houses. There were marks there. The girl claimed that they often played in this place as children, and sometimes they marked their growth lines. Huo Chen admitted that his wife had always been a leader, to which the girl responded that she supposedly knew how to convince with arguments. The husband asked Han Xing to tell him something else about herself. He assured her that he wanted to know more about his wife and her life. One of the locals pointed at another guy with his finger and asked if it wasn't the one who framed Brother Li. The other one replied that it was necessary to avenge him. Huo Chen considered this old area quite dangerous and offered his help, but his wife refused, and she thought to herself that he could only hinder her. The girl took a stance and held a bat in her hands and asked if the guys had seen that she was there with her husband. And the next moment, one of them was hit on the head with a bat. Another was rewarded with a kick to the Adam's apple. Han Xing angrily asked how the rotten fish and shrimp dared to provoke her. Huo Chen watched the skirmish with bated breath, and his assistant hid behind a wheelchair out of fear. Angry cries could be heard from the direction of the fight and a cloud of dust could be seen. The assistant assured that from that day on, the master must obediently obey his wife. Meanwhile, Han Xin had already finished off the guys and threatened to send them after their boss to the police station. The girl looked pleased and was beautiful, and under her heel, face down on the asphalt, lay a defeated, massively built opponent. Huo Chen wiped his wife's dirty hands with a snow-white handkerchief. He expressed his delight to the girl. The man assured her that her skills were quite unusual: investments, orchids, kung fu. And smiling, he said that he didn't even know what his wife would surprise him with next. At that moment, Han Xing's phone rang. As Huo Chenglin's guardian, she was informed that there were some problems with the boy's behavior. Therefore, she needed to come to the school as soon as possible for a talk. After a short greeting, our heroine was handed a painting by Chenglin. It depicted a guy on a carved throne chair with a glass in his hands and surrounded by sexy escort girls. Han Xing thought that the boy was fine, but this news depressed and upset her. It was known that Chenglin's father was quite the playboy, and that he had many women hanging around him. And the boy himself was nothing more than the result of a passionate night between strangers. It was hard to live in a world where everything around was a luxury for sale, and the parents didn't care about the child at all. And if the boy wasn't taken care of, it could develop into a big problem. Our heroine, in a quiet and calm voice, asked Chenglin to show his drawings in the studio. The boy was timid, and he asked if he would be scolded for that. His brother answered the question with a question. Why scold him since he had done nothing wrong? Chenglin agreed to show and offered to follow him in that case. Soon the three entered a spacious and bright studio. Ho Cheng asked his younger brother to show him his works. All the easels were curtained. The boy said he could only show one, and he came up to reveal the painting to the critical gaze of the family members. In the light of the crimson moon, the painting had a sense of hopelessness. The huge cage on heavy chains was clearly not intended for a fragile body and was a reminder of the cruelty of the world. Chenglin presented the plot of the picture and said that he depicted an elf, but the people of his world thought that he did not need to live. The boy said that his character was rejected by the whole world. They hated him and wished him dead. Han Xin grabbed the boy's shoulder. He turned around and apologized that his drawing was ugly. The girl assured Chenglin that his idea was unique and asked if she could add one detail with his permission. He did not object. Our heroine boldly picked up a brush. The boy asked his daughter-in-law if she thought the painting looked like perversion. The girl assured that each child was individual, and there was no point in adapting to standards. But the young performer's paintings should be more saturated with color. Han Xing assured that one look at his depressive face was enough to see his talent. Soon, a soft pink flower appeared from under her hand. The girl said that if you add one bright detail to a dark background, you could change the whole meaning of the painting. She asked Chenglin to look at the world from a different angle, and assured him that then he would be able to color the gray world in his eyes. Han Xing claimed that she was there to add more color to his vision, and asked if he agreed to that. The boy thought that every time he picked up a brush, He was cursed again by the person who was his biological mother. Every time he brought his paintings, she screamed and chased her son away, and so he thought that no one would ever like his paintings. He had never known what it meant to be recognized. His brother assured him that Chung Lin could tell them everything that was on his mind. Ho Chung promised that he would soon invite professional artists for his younger brother to help him understand and develop his talent in drawing. Lin smiled in response. Han Xing said that first it was necessary to pour this water. She had a special tool in her hands from which liquid dripped. The young man called out to our heroine. She, without looking up from her book, asked what was going on. He thanked the girl for what she did for the Ho family. Han replied that it was her duty. The young man narrowed his eyes and asked himself if she only wanted to take care of the family, and if she needed love. Han assured that she simply followed the methodology described in the book, and immediately saw positive results. The girl suggested inviting Xiao Bai to their home for dinner. After all, the guy had helped them a lot that time. The husband abruptly turned the gurney around and turned his back on the girl, and muttered that he would think about it. Han Xing was surprised by his reaction. She didn't understand what happened to her husband's face, and why his mood changed so quickly. Over his shoulder, Ho Chung suddenly remembered and turned around. He said that after that car accident, the Ho family had been silent for a long time, and so he asked his wife to prepare a family banquet. He asked his wife to make the event as lively as possible. Han Xing assured him that she would prepare a guest list soon and show it to him. Ho Chung said that it wasn't his mood that was changing. His wife had become too popular, and it was driving him into despair. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. The action took place in the Chen mansion. A bright red invitation sheet flew to the floor. The girl screamed that she categorically refused to go to the banquet that the Ho family was hosting. A vase of flowers also flew to the floor. The heroine told her brother that if she went there, Qian would be proud of herself, and this made her feel ashamed. The brother grabbed her hand tightly. He said that if the Huo family was not completely in his hands, then it would be impossible to destroy them, and the sister had to try not to screw up again. The girl, lowering her eyes, timidly promised to do everything possible to make amends. The young man patted his sister's cheek and asked her to be obedient. After all, only when he gained all the power would the Chen family become the most influential, and then his sister would be able to live in luxury for the rest of her life. The action takes place in the Heo banquet hall. The guests are happily chatting and drinking. Han Xin is next to her husband's younger brother. The boy has voluntarily agreed to entertain the guests today. The daughter-in-law instructed Chung Lin not to be overly nervous. She advised him to think of the guests as Chinese cabbage. Then Han Xin was called out. Brother and sister Chen came up to her. The girl began to apologize shyly, and she assured that she was under the evil influence of spirits that evening. But the blonde did not accept her apology. Instead, she sent her to Qian to beg for forgiveness, but she advised her to go away, since she had come to say a few useless words. Young Master Ho approached. He asked the guest not to think that her words were sincere only because her name translated as sincerity. Chen Li assured of her sincerity, and stated that in order to apologize, she even invited her sister, whom Han Xing had not seen for so long. The gentle creature Wu asked why her sister had not invited her to the banquet. She insisted that she thought that she might be angry with her and did not want to see her anymore. Our heroine couldn't understand whether this Chen was really that brainless or whether she was just pretending so masterfully. Wu touched the boy's shoulder. She guessed that he might be Huo Chen's younger brother. Chen Lin only tightly pressed his lips in response. The girl assumed that her sister hated her so much that even her husband's younger brother disliked her. The girl expressed her hope that Han Xing would be happy and asked him not to treat her so hostilely. Our heroine stroked Chen Lin's head and said that her youngest was so good. She assumed that the problem was in the person who touched him. Wu wanted to object to her sister, but she was interrupted. The guy assumed that the lady was making a scandal out of nothing, and he suggested that the youngest Ho was simply afraid of other people's touches. The guest appreciated the handsome man, and Ruin Han Xing recognized her husband from her past life, Zhang Xiaoyang. The young man said that he first met her near the slums, and since then the girl sank deep into his heart. Han Xing remembered how she saved the blonde man near the slums before her wedding. Our heroine was surprised by the feeling that the events happened so long ago, and Xiao still remembered everything. The blonde man held Han Xing's hand tightly. The girl asked him to behave decently as befits society. Xiao Yang placed his hand on the lady's waist. and quoted the wisdom, "Gratitude will come in greater quantities than the help originally given." The blonde assured that moreover he had been saved by Lady Ruan, and he asked if the girl had forgotten about it. Han Xing repeated louder that the guest should behave more decently, and tried to pull her hand away from the slow-witted youth. Xiao Yan assured that no one had ever rejected him like that, and he began to reproach the lady for playing cruelly with him. The interlocutor insisted that the guy was exaggerating. She said that he was a heartless and thick-skinned person at the same time, and he insisted that he couldn't understand why the lady said such cruel words, and in any case he is like a man with all 4 limbs intact. Xiao asked how her disabled husband, who needed care, was better than him. He assured her that Huo Chen would hardly be able to make her happy. Han Xing finally freed her hand, and angrily asked why she would suddenly listen to such things about a stranger. But he grabbed the girl's hand again. One of the guests noticed that the daughter-in-law of the Huo family had become bold enough to flirt with another man in public. The evil-tongued speaker assumed that the Huo family had really fallen that low. The instigator claimed that he never thought that the once influential president of the Ho family would one day be cuckolded. Wei asked her sister how she could flirt with other men in public. She insisted that even if Han did not love her husband, she should not have done so. After all, the man would be ashamed to look others in the face. The girl reminded her that she was also a daughter of the Ruin family, and asked her to stop behaving like a vicious woman. At this point, young Chung Lin intervened in the conversation. He called Wei a stupid woman, and angrily asked how she could say such a thing to his daughter-in-law. The girl replied that he was still a child and could not understand many things. She assured him that she only wanted the best for her sister, and she asked if everyone in the Ho family was really so foolish. The sister insisted that Ruin Weishi seemed to have forgotten one thing. She reminded her that her sister was an illegitimate child born from a mistress, and asked how she could say such things. The girl replied that her sister was talking nonsense. Han assured that she could provide facts, and she stated that she was the result of Ruin Ziming's depravity and proof that Jiang Ku was a shameless mistress. Ruin Wei said that she tried to convince her sister, and she complained that she did not listen to her and behaved strangely. Han Xing grabbed the glass and threw its contents on her sister. She asked her not to say anything, but to wash her wicked mouth thoroughly with this drink. Wei was surprised by her sister's actions, and was somewhat confused. She asked what she had done. Han Xing hoped that this glass of champagne would help her dear sister keep her mouth shut in the future, and if he wanted to provoke her again, the end might be different. The couple hurried away from sight, and Han Xing, pleased with herself, sipped drinks with berries. The guests who were watching the sisters squabble began to talk among themselves in disapproval, and that a girl from the slums could not become the madam of the Ho family. At this point, everyone heard the sound of the carriage wheels. Ho Chung asked to give way to him. He thanked the guests for worrying about his wife, and he expressed confidence that everyone present was smart. The man hoped that they would understand what was not worth talking about. He claimed that he had recently been in an accident and had miraculously survived, and therefore, the Ho family had not yet reached the end. The man asked his wife what she thought. Han Xin was silent, restraining herself. Then she turned around and ran away from his sight. Chen was pleased with herself. Her brother asked her why she brought that girl, knowing that she was on bad terms with her sister, and he reminded her that the original goal was to make amends. The boy shouted that his older brother was chasing his daughter-in-law. The girl armed herself with a bat while drunk. Then she threw out her older brother and all the guests were beaten. That's exactly how it happened. The elder sister thought that this child had a sick imagination, and tomorrow the daughter-in-law would simply beat him. Our heroine was writing something in her notebook when her husband came in. He asked what his other half was doing. The girl replied that she was thinking about how to use his 50 million. At today's banquet, the Chen family had actually trampled on their dignity. She apologized superficially and even dared to joke like that. This Chen is really brainless, but Chen Ming is much more dangerous. So Ruin wanted to use the 50 million to teach him a lesson. She turned to her husband and asked him what he wanted to spend it on. The guy replied that there was no problem with that. The girl could manage them herself. If she didn't have enough, she could always turn to him. Ruin Hunxing looked straight into her husband's eyes and asked him if he would go with her to his grandmother's after the ball. Mr. Ho agreed. Our heroine thought that today the guy agrees to all her requests, and the young man thought that she was very active. In one voice they said the same phrase, "Speak first." The girl became embarrassed and replied that she just wanted to thank him. Mrs. Mind flashed with memories from her past life. that she was very lucky to get married and enter the Jew family. They were married for a year, but she couldn't get pregnant. And her mother-in-law didn't like her and always said that such a pig was not needed in their family. No one was holding her by force. The girl thought she was stuck in this mud for a long time and kept lying to herself. And suddenly she said out loud that it was great to meet him this time. Our hero did not understand what his wife meant. He tried to calm her down and said that as long as he was around, she had nothing to fear. Ruin sat on his lap and asked him what he wanted to say. The guy asked if she had drunk alcohol today. He received an affirmative answer. But in her defense, the wife said that it was just a little bit. Our hero noticed that the girl was drunk. She agreed with him and said that she now understood why her strength was leaving her. She became embarrassed and asked again why he was always looking at her. Did he really think she was beautiful? Mr. Ho agreed that she was very beautiful and began to kiss her passionately. He grabbed her tightly by the waist and the girl did not resist. From the behavior of our heroine, it was clear that she liked her husband's caresses. Khan fell asleep in her husband's arms while he was caressing her. The guy was surprised how one could fall asleep at such a moment. He kissed her on the forehead and wished her good night. Our hero had a nightmare after their passionate day. It was as if his wife had swallowed him whole and he woke up in a terrible state. Our newlyweds got into the car and Khan mentally tried to remember what she had done yesterday. At this time, Mr. Ho, looking at his beloved, thought why his wife didn't ask if she was beautiful today. The couple went to see their grandmother. After all, the woman often said that she wanted to see her granddaughter's husband. When the couple approached the door, they heard screams behind her. Faye screamed that how could a grandmother do such a thing? The woman told her to take the man and get out. They were not welcome there. Looking behind the door, Khan saw her sister with a young man and asked what they were doing there. The grandmother was happy to see her beloved granddaughter. The girl asked Ruin in response why she was here. Who was this person next to her? Having seen that the guy was in a wheelchair, she assumed that it was Ho Chen. She couldn't believe that he looked handsome. She imagined him as an unkempt and unattractive person. The girl approached the young man and asked again if he really was Mr. Ho. Then she introduced herself as Ruin Weisi and added that our hero did not know her. She continued that she was Han Shin's sister and that she was supposed to be his bride. And she was very pleased to see that the couple had such a good relationship. And she asked the gentleman to put up with her sister's temper. But the guy interrupted Wai's speech and said that apparently she didn't know Han Shin very well. He continued that his wife always takes care of him. In his eyes, she is sweet and kind, and he is very glad that the girl became his wife. Our heroine intervened in the conversation and asked her husband what he was saying. The guy added that there was no one who loved her as much as he did. Wai was very angry because all this should have belonged to her. The guest turned to Han, but the girl immediately cut him off. She said that she was not closely acquainted with Mr. Ju. It did not matter for what purpose he came to her house, but she asked him to leave. She added that they were not welcome there. The young man wanted to add something, but Wai grabbed his hand and began to lead him out the door. Turning to those present, she said goodbye and apologized for disturbing them. When the guy and the girl found themselves on the street, he pushed her away hard and asked why she had forcibly taken him out onto the street. But Wai looked at him with tears in her eyes and suddenly asked him to save her sister from suffering in the Ho family. After all, the girl believed that her sister would be truly happy if she married Mr. Ju, and holding out her hand, she asked if the young man would help her. The guy agreed because he thought that this woman was very interesting. Han asked her grandmother why her sister and Mr. Ju had come. The woman replied that the young men were trying to prove that our heroine was not doing well in the Ho family. And if she marries and stays with that family, she will become a bad person. They also said that they cheated the girl out of 50 million yuan. The grandmother really believed that they would not be able to deceive her granddaughter, but she was worried that she might be in danger. Our heroine laughed and reassured the woman that her husband had given her the money for investment, and they had published this information to throw bait for one person. The grandmother was happy and said that she understood everything, although in reality she did not understand all of this. Finally, Ruin introduced her husband to the woman. The guy introduced himself as Ho Chen. Granny came up and started stroking our hero's head, saying that he was a good boy. More than once she had heard her granddaughter praise him. She asked if the girl was hurting him, if they were planning to have a baby. If that was part of their plans, then the grandmother would be happy to help raise it. The girl became embarrassed and tried to calm the woman down. When the young couple left their grandmother, Han told her husband that she did not expect him to be stunned. Mr. Ho admitted that his wife's temper was difficult to handle, but it turned out that his grandmother had the same character. The news of the 50 million spread quickly. In just one day, 2 people had already tried to use it to their advantage. The couple returned home and met Aunt Ho in the living room, who was waiting for them. Turning to the newlyweds, she said that she had come specifically and wanted to talk to Han Shin. The girls smiled and thought that the news had just come out, and the woman had already arrived. Her thoughts were interrupted by the guest's voice, who began to tell her that she had come about an investment company. Our heroine replied that she herself didn't really know anything. Her assistant recommended it to her. After looking at several properties, their income was very impressive, and in the end, no one would understand that it was a lot. Chen Ming's mother, looking at her interlocutor, remembered her son's words that it was very easy to deceive her, and out loud she said that it was a very good idea, and that her aunt fully supported it. But for a woman to feel more confident, more money is needed. Auntie herself is involved in investing in many projects. Her biggest return was when she got 10 times her initial investment. Khan was very surprised and asked to tell her more about it. Miss Ho continued her story by saying that she knew of an investment company that had a promising future. The woman was going to invest in it in the coming days if everything worked out. Then they will be able to earn at least as much. The girl was embarrassed and asked the interlocutor not to laugh at her. But she is ready to invest together with her aunt, and for the first time she spends so much money. Therefore, Han has no idea what to do and asked to take her with him to the company. Mrs. Ho thought about it because it was a money laundering company. But the girl could see what she shouldn't. Although she hasn't even graduated from university, what could she know about it? Besides, the company is full of confidants and the daughter-in-law can be easily fooled. The woman promised to take our heroine tomorrow to show her everything, but only so that she wouldn't tell anyone about it. After all, money can't be put on display. Han told her husband everything, and said that it was a foreign trade company if she remembered correctly. It was given to her aunt when the elder Mr. Ho was still alive. The girl admitted that she had read about it in a document by chance. Mr. Ho had given her the East Street Company, presumably to distance her from the conglomerate. The man just wanted to simplify things. This Chen Ming is very ambitious, and Auntie Huo is the leading pawn on his board. And very impatient. Our hero replied that he had underestimated Chen Ming, so that tomorrow his wife would take Han's assistant with her and both would be careful. At the foreign trade company, everyone was preparing to meet the newly minted Mrs. Ho. They tried to remove all the papers that did not concern her. Chen Ming's uncle Yuan tried to calm everyone down, saying that this girl was just a college graduate. If you showed her confidential documents, she would still not understand anything and would be scared. The girls confidently came to the company. They were met by Chen Yuan himself. Having greeted the guests, he added that he had heard a lot about Mrs. Ruin and asked who was behind her. Our heroine introduced her assistant and asked to talk to her while the girl looked around. The man, looking after her, thought that she really was beautiful, and it was no wonder that she could be so easily fooled. The assistant interrupted his thoughts and said that she had some doubts about this investment project. Mrs. Ho walked around the company and thought that the aunt's employees had muscles, but no brains. And after looking through the documents on the laptop, she was very surprised that they did not hide obvious things. At the same time, they think that our heroine is very stupid, and the girl thought that now she could put handcuffs on them, data that was packed without any protection. Suddenly, the aunt appeared and asked the assistant's opinion about the quotes. At this time, Chen Yuan was watching our heroine and worried that she had found fake documents. The assistant approached Khan and said loudly that she had a rough idea of the company. The girl interrupted and asked in the same loud voice whether it was possible to invest and in what volume. The employee replied that she could not give a precise answer yet. She needed to conduct a risk assessment. But the income from foreign trade was huge, and it would be a very promising investment. Auntie added that they were family and would not lie to their relatives. Such an opportunity was very rare, and the girl would definitely make a profit. Han Xin agreed and said to wait for good news. Getting into the car, our heroine said that Han's assistant is a very stern person. At the same time, she is very good at acting. The assistant thanked them for the compliment, but added that their documents were very unreliable and had many holes. Ruin laughed and said that the spreadsheets were popping up in her head again. But the girl replied that she had her own way of remembering. Our heroine boasted that everything went as easy as pie. Mr. Ho said that his wife was amazing. One of the Huo brothers ran in and shouted that someone was spreading rumors about Han Xin on the internet. All the websites were full of headlines saying that Mrs. Huo was very resourceful, seduces several attractive men at once. Also, there is a tendency to violence, beating family members, street fights. A woman without social skills and talent wants to become a public figure. The younger ones from our heroine's husband's family were shouting that their daughter-in-law was being slandered. If they find the one doing this, they will definitely beat him up. Or they need to hire a lawyer to write warning letters and make him pay for the slander. Our hero interrupted the children and ordered them to stop. He believed that public opinion was a war without gunpowder, not a game. Han patted one of her older brothers on the head and told him not to worry. Nothing bad would happen. It was very difficult for the tabloids to make up something true. Suddenly the front door opened and our heroine's father, very angry, and her sister walked in. The man started shouting from the doorway that Ruin had disgraced the family, that this is what her kind grandmother taught her, that his daughter is a harlot and an adulteress. The sister tried to calm her father down. The girl was beside herself with rage because of her father's words, and she told him to say whatever he wanted about her. But he didn't dare touch his grandmother, otherwise she wouldn't vouch for herself. Her father also shouted back that it was a disgrace for him to have such a daughter, that Ruin had no right to beat his sister. The man deeply regretted not having strangled her at birth. Han replied that it was all his family's fault, and called him a psychopath. Wai screamed at her father to calm down. After all, Mr. Ho was present. The man calmed down a little and turned to his daughter's husband. He asked for forgiveness and said that it was his fault that he had raised his daughter poorly. This scandal had brought shame on their Ho family. The Ruin family will punish the disobedient daughter as the master wants. The guy watched this scandal silently. In the end, he said that it was true that the family had been very neglectful of Ruin. Her father's current wife had not taken part in raising her, so she had grown up the way she was. Eventually, the master would have to settle accounts with their family. But now Han is his wife and a member of the Ho family. No one dares point a finger at the girl anymore. Since the father has not been interested in his daughter's life for 20 years, there is no need to appear here again. If the man goes against it, our hero will achieve justice for his wife. Vei joined the conversation and quietly whispered that her father was very angry. Everyone was worried that bad comments online could damage the gentleman's reputation. But she did everything for the good of their family. Our hero said menacingly that this was all over. He asked Jin Xuan to send the guests out of the house. The young man reached the door and told them to get out and not come here again. The door to this house is closed to unkind people. Our heroine was very pleased. The girl did not expect that her husband would be so angry. Mr. Ho said that he could not allow his wife to suffer. He asked the girl to go on holiday with Jin Xuan, but the wife thought everything was fine. The kids ran quickly up the steps. Khan said loudly that she would check their homework later. Left alone, our hero thought about when they would finally be sated with money and shares. It seems they are becoming more and more insatiable. His thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. The voice on the other end of the line said that the specialist they were working with would be returning to China tomorrow, so they could prepare for the next steps. Hanging up the phone, Mr. Ho thought that now he could prepare for action. Looking at his phone, he saw the news. All the groups in Telegram were full of headlines that the client's law firm Han Shin was conducting an investigation. Mr. Xiao Bai had no close contact with Madam. Zhu Xiaoxiang took the initiative to pester the girl. And after scrolling through all this, he thought that Madame had already solved the problem herself. Ruin was worthy of being his wife, because she surprised him every time. It seemed that he needed to have an operation sooner. He ordered his assistant to report to his wife that there was a foreign branch, in which there was a very complicated merger and acquisition case. Therefore, he would need to go there tomorrow. When the two people entered the office, the young man turned to the man and made a remark that he was drunk. But the man told his nephew not to be hard on himself. After all, Mrs. Ho was there today to inspect the company. She sat pointed to the laptop and added at this point, played games, and if the man hadn't deceived her, their plan wouldn't have worked. Chen Ming sat down in the place where the guest had been during the day, turned on the laptop and discovered that the girl had copied all the company's confidential documents. The guy got angry and started shouting that Mr. Ho's wife couldn't be stupid. Uncle allowed her to come to the office for verification. He could have just handed over the documents. The man became very nervous and asked Chen Ming what they should do now. The nephew replied that a dead man could not speak. Our heroine was walking down the street and talking on the phone. The man on the other end of the line said that he saw in the documents that they were using a nightclub to launder money. He asked if they should contact the police. The girl replied that the Chen family was very brave. Therefore, this information should be secretly sent to the police. No one should know anything, and hung up. She looked at the phone screen and thought that she didn't know if her husband was busy. He said he was going on a business trip, and it looked like that was it. Not far from the girl stood two guys smoking and silently watching her. Then suddenly they blocked her way, grabbed her and said that they needed to see what she was doing. Our heroine tried with all her might to escape from the hands of the criminals, but they put a handkerchief soaked in an alcohol ether mixture to her mouth, and Mrs. Ho fell asleep. The guys were very angry with her. They thought that these rich women were very interesting. If it weren't for the boss's order, they would have tasted her. Khan woke up on a couch in an unfamiliar room and thought that it was the same nightclub that is used for money laundering. The girl's hands were tied and her head hurt very badly. Ruin kicked the table over and there was a loud crash, causing the guys to come in. She asked them where their boss was. But the thugs didn't understand why she was so calm, and one gave the order to the other. To call the boss, the victim woke up. An escort entered the room and asked what was going on. A new person appeared. One of the criminals answered that the boss ordered her to be brought here. The girl noticed that the guest was very beautiful and probably had not yet learned her lesson. She suggested that she talk to her herself. She approached Mrs. Ho and told her not to be afraid of her. If the girl was obedient, everything would be fine. The boss is very kind. All the girls who come here cried about their lives, but this is their fate and they must accept it. If the guest becomes a good girl, she will suffer less. But our heroine screamed that she would never accept such a fate. If she had accepted it, she would have died long ago. The escort hugged her and said that then all that was left was to suffer. Quietly, behind her back, she untied the guest's hands. The guy kicked Begonia out to get ready to meet her clients. But Ruin called out to her and asked her name, and the girl introduced herself. 30 minutes later, the boss came in and turned to our heroine and asked how she was doing. The girl, without thinking, answered the question with a question about why he brought her here. The man continued that he had to keep his word to the lady. But the lady not only touched his subordinates, but also stole something important from her friend. So he had no choice but to invite the girl here. He was sure that she understood him. The boss added that he had pulled off a little trick and hoped that the lady would cooperate and entertain his brothers. Khan got very angry, her eyes filled with hatred towards her interlocutor. And in a menacing tone she replied that she would not cooperate. Khan jumped up from the sofa and hit one of the people present on the head with a bottle. Everyone was puzzled how the girl managed to untie her hands. They shouted at the girl that she would die today like a little scum and might even resist. But her answer was that the guys would die today. And she started hitting everyone with a bat. One of the bandits shouted that the police were here. Another said that he would leave first, and the third should get rid of our heroine and catch up with everyone. The guys sent the boss forward, and Ruin with a bat caught up and shouted to stop. Suddenly, Mr. Ho's brother appeared and shouted that he would save his daughter-in-law. One of the guys knocked out Jin Xuan with one blow of his hand, and he fell to his knees, worried that now everyone would laugh at him. Our heroine snatched the stick from the bandit's hands and began to beat him, saying that no one allowed him to beat the youngest. At that time, the brother was watching the girl and thinking about how beautiful she was. It would be better not to anger her in the future. Han approached Jin and, putting a handkerchief on the wound, told him not to move. An ambulance would arrive soon. But the young man told her to go after those men. The young man called his brother and soon he would be here with his people and save them. The girl smiled and thought that the children of the Ho family were much smarter than their peers. When Ruin went out into the hallway, she saw the men running away. She turned to the boss and asked if he was leaving already. The man replied that he had offended her today and it was his fault. But now the lady was free and they were even. It was not necessary to beat everyone up. Khan said that because of his cruelty, many families were destroyed. Many girls fell into the very abyss and his men wounded her husband's younger brother. So it was time for payback. The boss showed a crooked earring and told the girl to look at it. Our heroine recognized that this earring belonged to Begonia. She angrily asked what he had done with it. At that moment, one of the guys stabbed Madame in the shoulder from behind. And boss said that he had taught her a lesson. If Han had not married Ho Chen, the man would have allowed her to serve him in his personal company. The girl replied that she was on the verge of death. Then she hit him several times, saying that only the boss would go to hell today. The man fell and the girl leaned against the wall. Her body was pierced by unbearable pain, and Ruin thought about her husband. where he was now. Her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of the master, who called her by name. The girl looked to the side and saw Ho Chen. He was approaching her in his wheelchair, and Han wondered if she really meant that much to her husband. Our heroine woke up in the hospital. She was being interrogated by a pretty girl from the police. Her husband was nearby. Khan said that boss took out a knife and tried to run away. The policewoman replied that she understood the general picture of the incident, and if there was nothing more to add, then it was time to say goodbye. But Ruin asked the girl again if they had saved a girl named Begonia yesterday. She was about 20 years old and the same height, very beautiful. The husband offered his beloved to eat an apple. At that time, the guest was looking for information on the tablet. Khan said that if it is impossible to find, then there is no need. She is very smart, so she could escape during the chaos. The police representative said that unfortunately Begonia was dead. Our heroine was very upset and said that boss' son was a ruthless man, that she was freed only thanks to this girl. The girl was the first person who helped her for no reason. She couldn't believe it happened before she could thank him. Begonia herself was in a swamp of despair, but was ready to risk her life to give another a chance for salvation. After speaking her thoughts, Han burst into tears and Mr. Ho tried to calm her down. Then she continued that she should have caught that bastard there. Begonia's death broke her heart. Her body felt empty because of this news. Her husband wiped the tears from her face and said that he would help fill the void. Even if she didn't save the girl, they can prevent other women from being recruited, so that they don't go down the same path. The couple can create a fund to help girls in trouble. The profits from their previous investments can be invested in it. He suggested inviting the investors who had been deceived by Auntie Ho to invest with the newlyweds. Our heroine was very happy with this offer. She thanked her husband from the bottom of her heart for always being there and supporting her in everything. Khan said that she admired her beloved very much. Then she gently hugged him around the neck and kissed him hard. At that moment, the youngest came in, all bandaged, and greeted the couple. He smiled and said that he hadn't seen anything. But the brother replied that the young man deserved praise for saving his daughter-in-law. Walking near the house, our heroine told her husband that in a few days she would go to the library to read a few books. She wanted to broaden her horizons. She suggested to her husband that after the foundation was created, they invest in educational institutions, so that people who found themselves in the same situation as Khan once did could get a better education. Mr. Ho agreed with his wife. Jin took advantage of the opportunity to ask his brother for money to open a nightclub. The gentleman's sister ran out and told the good news that the orchid had produced its first bud. Everyone rushed to look at the flower, but the man in the wheelchair was forgotten. Admiring his wife, the master thought that she sometimes behaved like a child, but the servant interrupted his thoughts that Boss Song had cracked. That Chen Yuan was in cahoots with him to kidnap and kill Madam was his idea. The day before yesterday, the two of them went to that company together. Our hero thought that Chen Ming was getting himself into more shackles from which he would not be able to get out, and he said out loud to contact the Gu family and tell them that the orchid was saved. Also, that the Ho family was holding a flower party next week. Let them come and admire the flowers. The subordinate said that he would carry out the order, and he said that the results of the post-operative treatment had arrived. All the indicators were normal, and Dr. Gu said that there were no problems with a full recovery. Mr. Ho was very happy about this wonderful news. The servant suggested telling the mistress about it. The guy agreed to tell the madam about it. Mr. Ho wondered if his wife would be happy when she learned that he would soon be back on his feet. Would she let him hug her? His thoughts were interrupted by his beloved. Han informed him that Mr. Gu had expressed a desire to see the orchid in a couple of days. Our hero agreed and asked the girl to organize everything for the flower party. She invited people from both families, but Chen Ming was not allowed. Ruin was very surprised. The boy explained that the shareholders' meeting was coming up, and that the old men were getting restless. Chen would use this opportunity to remove the master. With no enemy, he saw a chance at this party. To mend fences with the Gu family. The wife promised to do whatever her husband wanted. Mr. Ho wanted to add something else, but his brother interrupted him, saying that the orchid wasn't feeling well. Our hero wanted to tell his other half the good news about his health, but she ran away, saying only that they would talk later. Han began preparing for the party and gave everyone assignments. She told the cooks that Mr. Gu liked sweets and therefore needed to prepare several dishes. Chen Qianya asked to call everyone and invite everyone to the party. Xiao Ningye told her to pick out a few songs to perform for the guests. Chen Linya asked to pick up the flower arrangement she ordered from the florist tomorrow, and Jin Xuan was simply instructed to stay at home. One of the brothers, turning to his daughter-in-law, said that the girl openly demonstrates her distrust of him. He protests. Mr. Ho turned to his wife again and said that his legs, but the girl did not listen to the end and asked what was wrong with his legs again. Did they hurt, or what? She promised to take him to Dr. Gu tomorrow. Chen Lin took the flowers and walked along the road looking at them. He was delighted with the beauty, as expected. The daughter-in-law chooses the best of everything. Suddenly, a female voice called him and asked why the young man had not come to her. When he turned around, he saw his mother and asked why she was here. Ye Tongtong replied that she had heard rumors that the Huo family was throwing a flower party for Mr. Gu. After all, it was her son's birthday, and she wanted to be alone with him. The young man replied that she was confusing his birthday again. The lady, unabashed, continued that there would be many investors at that party and she wanted her son to take her with him. Chen Lin thought that when he realized his daughter-in-law's sincere feelings, that she truly cared for him. His mother's lies became unbearable for him. The young man calmly replied that his mother had indeed made a mistake. The boy would not allow her to use him to get into his father's house. Mom got angry and pulled out part of the bouquet and threw it on the asphalt. She didn't understand how her son could go against her. Chen Lin reminded her how she locked him in a dark room alone as a child, and the child cried so hard that he couldn't make a sound at all. Then he said he wasn't going to invite her to the party. He turned around and started to walk away. The woman shouted after him that if he left now, he would no longer dare call her mother. The young man nodded his head affirmatively. When the boy entered the house, his daughter-in-law met him. Noticing that Chen Lin was in a bad mood, she asked what had happened. The guy lowered his head and said that there had been an accident, and now he would go and buy new flowers. But before that, he wanted to see her. The girl tried to stop the boy, but suddenly Mr. Ho intervened and expressed his opinion that most likely the brother met his crazy mother. After meeting her, the young man always felt out of sorts. After all, his mother was a pain in the ass, and even though Chen Lin was a layman, he still wanted to receive his mother's love. But this woman was interested in nothing but money and men. She couldn't truly love him. Our heroine listened silently, and then said that when she finished her main job she would meet with this woman. She would warn her not to have any more negative influence on the boy. Turning towards the gate, Han saw a woman who was knocking down all the flowers and everything that came under her feet along the way. The elder brother asked Tong Tong why she came. The madam replied that she just came to look. Ruin hit the guest hard and wondered if she was Chen Lin's real mother. The woman held her shoulder and turned to Mrs. Ho and asked why she had hit her so hard. She almost died. She thought about how she didn't know that the Wo family's eldest daughter-in-law was so cruel. If Chen Ming hadn't offered to ruin the purple orchid for money, she would never have come to this house. Suddenly, Chen Lin came out and asked his mother what she was doing there. The guest answered innocently that she had come to see her son who had suddenly run away. She didn't understand why the boy was interrogating her as if she were a criminal. After all, she was his mother, and he was talking to her like that. The woman began to examine the greenhouse and could not find the right flower. Han asked how Tung got here and why she came to the flower garden. The guest replied that she had come to check on her and what was so special about this flower garden. The son began shouting at his mother again to clean up. If she needed money, he agreed to give it. The woman screamed that these were just a few stinking flower pots. A son should not talk to his mother like that. The boy began to push the woman away by force and she fell. She was very upset that she dropped a couple of pots, and the boy pushed her mother. Then she screamed at our heroine that she was brainwashing her son. The scum from the slums can only be a cunning fox. A bitch is a bitch. She entered the Ho family, but the cripple could not satisfy her. So the madam switched to her minor son. The guy couldn't stand it and started to strangle his mother. Han tried to calm him down. Chen Lin couldn't understand why she was talking about her daughter-in-law like that. After all, the girl is not like that. Why did Mom think everyone was bad? Ruin fell on her chest and cried. He asked Mrs. Ho if his mother really loved him. After all, she always did everything for herself. Why does he have such a mother? The woman angrily called her son a brat. She said that he always begged for her love. Our heroine couldn't stand it and pinned Tun to the floor and asked her what she wanted. Apparently to be beaten again. Such selfish and ill-mannered women don't deserve to be mothers. The answer was not long in coming. Lying on the floor, the guest began to scream that our heroine was so noble. She was sure that she had married the cripple not because of great love. She just needs money. She is lucky that she is the madam of the Huo family and is no different from her. Han was very angry that the woman touched her husband. The door to the greenhouse opened and a male voice asked Tung who had given her permission to enter the Ho household. The women were very surprised to see that our hero was standing on his feet. The wife ran up to her husband, and he immediately answered her that he had wanted to say something for a long time, but Ruin was always busy. Turning towards the guest, he ordered that her things be collected and taken to Africa. Tun was very scared and said that she had made a mistake. She asked her son to stand up for her. She wanted them to let her go. But the boy replied that she had not considered him her son before. There would be no place for her in their home. Rising from the floor, she saw the right flower and tore it out by the roots. She said that although she would suffer, the Ho family would also be in a bad way without the orchid. She sent everyone to hell. Holding a flower in her hands, she shouted that their orchid was gone. But Han, smiling, replied that the guest looked very stupid. Chen Lin said that this was not the orchid that his daughter-in-law was taking care of. The real orchid was in another place and pointed at it. Tung couldn't understand how an ordinary flower could be an orchid. The son told his mother that she was so stupid that she couldn't tell the difference between a real orchid. He acts so confidently and thinks that he is able to create problems for his daughter-in-law. The boy was very sorry that he longed for love from such a stupid and evil woman. The gentleman hugged the boy and told him to send the woman away. Chen Lin agreed. Tong was scared and tried to catch up with her son. The woman screamed that she was his mother and he couldn't do this to her. Our heroine approached her husband and said that the issue was resolved. Now someone had to explain why such important news was hidden from family members. She asked how long ago he had cured his legs, but our hero replied that he could only take a few steps for now. Their conversation was interrupted by Mr. Ho's subordinate, who reported that Chen Ming had called an emergency shareholders meeting. It seemed like he couldn't sit still, so the guy wouldn't be able to attend the flower party. His family members had to enjoy it without him. He leaned towards his wife and quietly whispered that if anyone from the Chen family came, the girl should teach them a lesson for him. The wife smiled and said she would tell him later how it all went. In front of the gates, our heroes met Wang Zheng, a director of an entertainment agency, and Feng Chen, a director of niche films. Auntie Ho warned Wang that if he wanted to get some money today and start investing, he had to try himself. The man agreed. The relative watched from the sidelines and thought, what kind of party can there be without an orchid? Who would like a ruined flower? Apparently this was a cover for Ruin and Mr. Gu's cooperation. Chen Ming and the others should have completely displaced Huo Chen by now, and she should take all of their family's money before Old Man Gu arrived. Auntie, entering the greenhouse, addressed those present that they had forgotten about her and not invited her to the flower party. Apparently they no longer considered her family. The woman was very surprised when she saw her daughter-in-law with Mr. Gu. She couldn't believe her eyes that he had arrived so early. Han replied that she was thinking about her aunt being busy with her investment company. That's why I didn't send her an invitation. At that moment, I thought that the Chen family wouldn't leave things like that. There's a shareholders meeting going on now, so Auntie came to see them. Apparently, Chen Ming is very confident. The woman turned to her daughter-in-law and said that in the western region, someone had recently bought up all the flowers in the shops. Didn't she understand that the land in those areas was suitable for growing vegetables? I asked our heroine if planting flowers was not similar to farming. The girl also does this. Mr. Gu was very unhappy that there were those in this world who could not distinguish flowers from vegetables. Chen Lin said that Auntie Huo has little knowledge because she does not read books. She should talk less when she goes out into the city. Ornamental flower growers are in great demand, and if they hear a woman's words, they will think she is mocking them. Auntie was very angry with such a description of her. She said that she was simply not interested in such things. She did not want to argue, because today she wanted to discuss the issue of investments. She invited her daughter-in-law to come into the house. Our heroine agreed with the woman, but she couldn't understand if the auntie came here. Then why she brought these people? At this time, the woman smiled and replied that there was a shareholders meeting going on, and that she had come because of the Ho family's investment. After all, businessmen are quick to adapt to changing circumstances. Han smiled and said that her relative should be careful so that the strong wind of change would not blow her away. And she asked Jin Xuan to take care of Mr. Gu. Auntie watched her daughter-in-law silently, and thought that the little slum bitch was really crazy. After the meeting, the Huo family would change completely. She wondered how Ruin would act afterwards. Having gathered with the guests at the table, One of the men noticed that the Ho family was very rich, and all the furniture was unusual. Another suggested investing in films. If our heroine agreed, then they could immediately discuss their cooperation. The aunt noticed that they hadn't discussed anything yet, but they were already suggesting investing. Our heroine asked who was next to the man. He pointed at the young man and said that they studied at the same department. The guy is a fan of feature films. Usually his films do not pay off all the investments, but the guy was indignant and said that they were both directors. There is no need to displace good films with money. Based on statistics, by making bad films, most directors desecrate the entire Chinese culture. Wang Zheng replied that there was no need to think like that. He was now a director promoted by a star entertainment agency. His films were doing very well. Our heroine silently watched the director's conversation, and she thought that the entertainment agency was an unscrupulous company that had squeezed Shen Nan in the future. A terrible company that manipulated girls and guys who came into show business to make their dreams come true. Many of their artists were in the depths of mental illness and depression. It was good that she came face to face with them. The man laughed and said that this is what bullying is now called. He said that the guy looked at who gave him the penny. Unexpectedly, Han said that she chose Feng Chen. The man was talking to Mrs. Ho about his script for a feature film. Han Xing asked if the director had it with him, wanting to look at it. Feng Chen held out a thick folder. He said he took it with him, hoping that it could interest someone. He assured that due to the variety of locations, a lot of investment was required. Han Xing comfortably settled on the sofa and began to read the script. She thought that the director was not so impudent as to deceive the girl who did not understand anything. The girl appreciated his honesty, and the script was also excellent. Another director convinced her that Mrs. Ho was still young and ignorant of the film industry, and he offered to invest in his romantic drama. Han Xing was indignant, and squinting her eyes she asked sarcastically if she had really been taught how to work. Auntie insisted that Director Wang was an expert in his field, and his opinion was worth listening to. She was sure that romantic stories brought in more profit than feature films. Han Xing stated that she was a person with natural antipathy. She assured that she did not like to watch what others did, but preferred to swim against the current. Our heroine analyzed the script, and came to the conclusion that to achieve the best effect, it would be necessary to travel to different locations for filming. She realized that if she calculated correctly, the amount would be small. Han Xing understood that there were many romantic films in the film industry market. She voiced that she was willing to invest 60 million in director Feng Chen's film. The young man happily thanked Mrs. Ho, his eyes filled with enthusiasm. Auntie assured that low-budget feature films were not popular, and so Khan should think twice. After all, what could a person from the slums know? The woman narrowed her eyes and advised to leave these investments so that later they would not have to be returned. Han asked what her aunt meant. She said that after today's shareholders' meeting, the Ho conglomerate would be transferred to the ownership of her son, Chen Ming. The girl said that the other woman was also confident when she invested in East Street. She screamed, asking what it all meant. Han Xing came up and spoke quietly, almost in her ear, that she would reveal a secret. She assured her aunt that her husband had cured her legs. The woman screamed about the impossibility of such a thing, and asked how such a thing could have been accomplished. She dropped the cup in her excess of emotion. It fell to the floor and broke, spilling its contents. Colleagues approached the shareholders' meeting. Zhao Yiping thought that it would be right for Mr. Chen Ming to take the position of CEO of Huo's company, but Xu Zhou had a different opinion. After all, the success of Huo's company was achieved thanks to Huo Chen's hard work. It was impudent to seize power while Mr. Huo was at home recuperating. Chen Ming slammed his fist on the table with authority and asked, if he doesn't rule, then who will? He asked Xu Zhou to put the jokes aside, and he assured that if Ho Chen had an accident, it was not a reason to stop the company's development. After all, the employees needed to be paid. One gentleman supported the speaker, that everyone had to support their families, not do charity. Another said that they, like Lu Li Ho, would do the best for the company. Xu Zhou couldn't understand how they could take advantage and be such ungrateful scoundrels. He said he was deeply disappointed. Chen Ming insisted that he did not understand why he was so stubborn. He insisted that there was no point in expecting help from Ho Chen. After all, his cousin was an invalid who did not have the strength or the spirit to continue leading. The guy assured that Ho Chen's reign was already in the past, and he would lead the Ho conglomerate into a new future. But then the person who entered caught everyone's attention. The shareholders wondered what he was doing here. And the guy said that Chen Ming said well, and he suggested that he continue this topic further in his presence. Chen Ming jumped up from his seat in surprise. He asked how a cripple who couldn't walk could heal his legs. Chen Ho stood confidently on his own 2 feet, and the members of the shareholders' meeting jumped up from their chairs in incredible surprise. Chen Ming asked his subordinate if he saw the same thing. He mumbled something unintelligible. Now it was all over for the ambitious Mr. Ming. He knew that he would no longer be able to take the director's chair. Ho Chen doesn't really need to do anything. After all, the cowardly shareholders will immediately go over to his side. The young man gritted his teeth and cursed to himself. Mr. Ho Chen said that it seemed that they were not very happy to see him in full health. The guy sat down more comfortably in the chair and said that the meeting could continue. Chen Ming controlled his emotions and congratulated his cousin on his unexpected recovery. The director apologized and suggested continuing the meeting. He assured that he did not want to detain his already busy colleagues. Zhao Yiping was pleased and smiled. After all, now that Mr. Huo had returned to the leadership position, he was supposed to lead their company to new heights. Chen Ming quipped that it was not necessarily only Huo who could do this, and claimed that there was another person present who could do it too. The young man told his cousin that there were no family ties in business, and he declared his readiness to compete with him on equal terms. And the one who wins should become the CEO of the company. Mr. Ho Chen assured that he was ready to go to the end. Auntie Minnie was angry and asked what kind of bullying this was. Han Xing ordered Jin Xuan to escort Mr. Director and Auntie out of here. The young man practically chased the protesters out the door. And our heroine, pleased with herself, sipped her tea in a comfortable position. The young director thanked Miss Ho for her help, and he assured that he was not so mean as to force someone to make promises and then demand funding. Han Xing insisted that she had no intention of helping him. She said that she had never invested in a film before, but she liked the script, so she was willing to invest in it. The aspiring director asked again if it was true. The girl insisted that she was not joking at all. The guy said that money was unimportant, and if there was little of it, the team would be ready to sacrifice sleep and food. Han Xing asked the director not to cry. After all, he had a great chance. She promised to invest 60 million as she had promised, and she assured him that she was not the one who did not keep her promises. The assistant asked Mr. Ho if he really intended to invest money in developing the western region in order to overthrow Chen Ming. The director confirmed this. He assured that Chen Ming had the capital to develop the eastern part of the city. Moreover, the development of the city should not be one-sided. This could widen the gap between the rich and poor classes. The assistant assured that the opponent had already taken care of the developers. Mr. Ho assured that the current time was a game of capital, and it was worth making better plans in order to influence the plans of those above. The guy said he had to go back and fix everything. The assistant laughed and noted that the gentleman was in a very energetic mood. Ho Chen had a book of family counseling advice in his hands. He wondered if it could help him. There was a question about the gifts that were going to be sent to orphanages. Opinions differed. Junior Mr. Ho assured that he could hold a drawing master class. His brother joked that he could be a bad influence on the children. The brothers began to compete, and the younger one threatened to paint the older one's clothes. The girls were having fun watching this. Huo Chun was also amused by this fuss. It had only been a few months since Han Xing had joined their family, but the cold silence of the past seemed like a century ago. The middle brother asked if the household had seen the news today. It said that Chen Ming had allegedly forced his brother out of his wheelchair. The elder brother coughed, hinting at his presence. And the young man, having assured his daughter-in-law that they would go for gifts, hurried to leave Han Xin alone with her husband. Our heroine greeted her husband. She asked how the shareholders' meeting had gone. Chen replied that everything had been fine thanks to his wife, and he asked what she had talked about with her family. The guy suggested going together in a couple of days, assuring her that he would be busy at work for now. Khan asked if it was worth taking the chair with her. He replied that he wanted to make it a surprise. Chen said that his wife had been so busy these days that he had not had a chance to tell her about his health condition. He offered to give Han a shoulder massage and asked her to forgive him. The girl laughed carefreely. The husband asked the reason for that. Han Xing assured that seeing how handsome her husband was, she felt like she was taking advantage of that handsome face. Chen assured that this was not the case at all, and looked lovingly at the smiling girl. After all, She managed to light a light of hope in his soul with her undeniable determination, and literally pulled him out of the quagmire of darkness by force. The guy assured that without her, Ho Chen probably would not have been in this world. Her husband assured her that she was born very beautiful, therefore she should not be angry. He asked her to remain as kind as she was. Khan replied that her husband's legs had become stronger and his mouth sweeter. He suggested his wife try it herself. Khan pulled him towards her by his tie. A moment later, the couple merged in a kiss. Meanwhile, the orchid asked not to forget to water it. The plant seemed to have been feeling someone's close attention lately. The couple enjoyed the moment of dissolving in the partner's gaze. They called each other's names with tenderness in their voices, but their solitude was interrupted. Middlemaster Ho burst in and announced that he had forgotten his mug of water somewhere around here. The brother got angry and looked at him angrily. Han Sin was also indignant that she and her husband were seen in a moment of tenderness again. At the dinner table, Chen was courting his wife. He brought a spoon to her and offered her to try the dish, assuring her that it was very tasty. The servant was afraid that he would be left without a job. The girl asked her husband how the shareholders' meeting went yesterday. She assured him that she had heard a rumor that they had allegedly discussed the development of the old part of the city. Han Xing was interested in what area her husband wanted to choose. She said that the eastern side was more developed, because it was connected to railways and highways, and in the western district, there were many old buildings, and this made it difficult for it to develop. Chen assured that he was very optimistic about the western district. After all, it was a unique combination of tradition and modernity. He believed that it was necessary to continue improving the ecology of that area. Han Xing said that there was a big risk in that, but her husband insisted that all business had its risks, and the wife herself was also from that area. Chen wanted the place where his beloved grew up to develop and prosper. The girl was surprised by such attention from her husband. Khan took the guy by the hand and assured him that she could trust him completely. The man assured that the eastern district was more competitive, and therefore, careful preparations had to be made to capture this part of the city. Gu Zhao, the second son of the Gu family, asked what kind of riots were going on in the western district. After all, they were planning to develop infrastructure, not fight poverty. To which the third daughter of the Gu Ju family responded that the western region had a rich history, and that in her opinion, it was more suitable for development, and therefore had to keep up with the times. The brother asked why she was going to do charity work, and he called her a short-sighted and soft-hearted woman. She assured Gu Zhao that this was the result of her thinking, and if he could not refute what she said, then there was no point in trying to elevate himself by humiliating the female sex. The head ordered to stop the debate. He reminded that he asked to convince him, and not to start a fight in front of him, and he declared that tomorrow his assistant would assign everyone to head departments. Based on the results, he was going to decide who would be the heir to the Gu family. The young man tried to convince his grandfather that his sister was actually an indecisive and hopeless woman. Gu Zhao asked how such a person could lead the family's large capital to a bright future. His sister asked how he dared to doubt his grandfather's decisions. The Ho family arrived at the gates of the orphanage. The building itself was old and in need of major repairs. The gap between classes was widening, and it was questionable whether Ho Chen could do anything to help the area. An elderly woman met Han Xing. The girl said that she had done a titanic job to maintain the orphanage all these years. The caretaker assured that the children were good and obedient. The guest assured that since it was getting cold, she intended to make additional donations in order to buy warm clothes for the children. She also promised to help with the repairs. The administrator sincerely thanked Mrs. Ruin. The children had already gathered to the delicious smell. The sight of the food pleased them. The most impatient one asked how long it would take to cook. But then the noise in the street attracted everyone's attention. The person who entered was holding the man by the collar, and he was saying that they had not yet paid for the external security of this facility this month. The red-haired man threw the poor guy to the ground and asked how this old man dared to show off in front of him. His partner rudely echoed the threats. Han Xing hurried to the man's aid, asking how he was feeling, and turning an angry look at the guys, she furiously asked what they were doing. The guys asked who she was here anyway, and who dared to yell at them on their own territory. The chief assumed that the girl was clearly new here, and therefore he was going to forgive her if she kneeled down and said, "Big brother," and let her go. But Han Xing had a different proposal. Behind her stood the orphans, huddled at her feet in fear. Our heroine, without thinking much, used the frying pan that was in her hands. The bottom of the dish was abruptly applied to the guy's cheek. The partner rushed to help his boss. The aggressor, rubbing his bruise, said that he didn't care who she was and asked to call someone. And then it occurred to them that in front of them was the same Madame Ho who had recently beaten up boss' son. The blonde replied that since they now knew her identity, she should run away as quickly as possible while she was still whole. She declared that from that day on she would be in charge of the shelter and advised not to return here. The boys quickly ran away, realizing that Madame Ho was not to be trifled with. And the children joyfully made noise around Han Sin, heartily rejoicing at her victory over the hooligans. A bespectacled man appeared out of nowhere and greeted Madame Ho. She assumed he was visiting the orphans. The stranger claimed that he was aware that she had grown up in the western region, and therefore he was sure that the girl knew the area well. Meanwhile, Han Xing was pouring fresh food into plates. She invited the master to eat dumplings with the children, and she assured him that the city was developing now, and the western district would soon become better. The gentleman with glasses was surprised that this was the girl's favorite part of the city. After all, it would be difficult to develop it. Han Xing was a little wary. She wondered to herself who this gentleman could be who knew so well about the development of the city. The man seemed to have overheard her thoughts and handed over his business card and introduced himself. Zhao Jinping expressed his hope that Mrs. Huo would share her thoughts with him. He assured that he was especially interested in the development of the western part of the city. Only then did our heroine realize that the famous Professor Zhao was in front of her. The girl remembered from her past life how her then-husband had spoken disparagingly about the professor, that he had thought in vain of participating in the development of the western region. Han remembered that in the previous fate, Zhu Xiao wanted to get a piece of the urban development project, so he went to the famous Gu Zhao. But then her husband returned dissatisfied with their intentions. The professor had put a lot of effort into planning the eastern region, and he was closely watched by the leadership. But unfortunately, when it came to large sums, all the shortcomings of the western region were amplified. And in the end, the professor failed. The development project was an important step in the career of Gu Zhao, the second son of the Gu family. Without winning this project, he would not have been able to seize power in his family and then suppress the Huo family. The professor assured that the economic downturn in the western region was not an advantage at all. But unlike the eastern part, it had a richer cultural heritage. He emphasized that here, there were many old buildings. The combination of modernity and monumentality could not be the best step for development, and it would be good to document all the changes in the city. Han Xing thought about it. After all, documenting it was a good idea in her opinion, and it could be used to popularize the western region. Our heroine sat on the couch and looked at the photograph. She realized that in this way the public would be able to appreciate the value of this area of their city. The husband noticed the state of his beloved, and asked Han Xing what she was thinking about while smiling so happily. The wife replied that she had met a famous professor today, who had excellent ideas about the development of the western region. She assured me that it would be possible to make a documentary film and use it as advertising. Chen suggested capturing more ancient buildings and local customs, which would be pleasing to the viewer. The husband said that money had been invested in the director. Let him do it. He believed that if that documentary caught on, it would become a hit. And in honor of the film's premiere, he suggested to hold a press conference in the format of a party. After all, it could also advertise the film. Khan responded that the businessman's intellect was acting as a screen. At that very moment, the middle gentleman Ho came to the door. The young man brought a list of expenses for the orphanage, but hearing the voices, he doubted that it was worth going in, afraid to see something that was not worth seeing. In the cafe, Mrs. Ruin Han met with the young director. He was surprised that they asked for a meeting so suddenly, and he assumed that it was due to a large demand for investment. Han Xing assured that there was another reason. She said that Ho's company was leaning towards developing the western region. That's why she asked to make a documentary about traditions and architecture. The western part of the city. The girl was going to advertise it along with the film, and for this she planned to hold a press conference. The director thanked the lady. Ruin Han asked who had cast the leading actors in the previous film. The young man asked if the lady had wanted to cast other people. Our heroine said that she was going to hold an auction at the press conference and sell several items from the film, as well as the place for the main character. The director was categorically against it. and he believed that as soon as the capital side was involved in the production of the film, the quality of the final product could deteriorate significantly. Ruin Han decided to invest in his film because she liked the script, and the main character was the most important part of the film, so he had to refuse. The girl held out a bank card and assured that she was ready to invest more than the agreed 100 million yuan. Feng Chung asked the lady to find another director for this project. He did not think that their values could coincide. He assured that the film was in the pre-production stage and cost Ruan Han a lot of money, but he couldn't do anything to make up for his guilt. He offered to just give her a version of the script, and Han Xing could find another director. But the girl assured Mr. Feng that he was worried in vain, and she said that it was not in vain that she chose him for cooperation. Miss Ruin was only going to participate in the audition auction and would not interfere with the final casting, and all the proceeds from the auction will go to the pre-production of the film in the Western region. She was sure that Feng Chung was familiar with the underfed children from the orphanage. Han Xing argued that the western part of the city needed to be developed so that it would not turn into a slum. The aspiring director agreed with her and agreed to help in this matter, but on one condition. Our heroine happily agreed, and they shook hands to seal the deal. The girl silently promised to make the western region special. Meanwhile, Ho Chen Lin danced in front of the children, entertaining them. The girls whispered that when he grew up, he would become like his father and be sent to Africa. Soon the headlines were full of news, and the main one was that Mrs. Ho had invested 160 million in a previously unknown director. Feng Chen sent stills from the film to Miss Ho. Those pilot takes were apparently filmed in the western region. Ruan Han and the director were active on social media, and they invited all interested parties to the auction and casting. The girl sat and read the chat feed. She realized that her plan had worked and hoped that there would be no problems. Here our heroine saw Shen's account on social networks and decided to look at it. It seemed that things were going well for her childhood friend, and she hadn't entered the entertainment industry yet. Han Xing decided that the girl should live a normal life. Meanwhile, at home, Shen Nan was lying on her bed watching the tape, and she was telling herself that she had an incredible desire to become an actress. But then she saw a chat with a casting call organized by her friend Han Xing and little-known director Feng Chen. Shen Nan was surprised by the news that Proud Star invested in the film, and she wanted to try to participate in the casting. After all, if she successfully passed it, she would be able to see Gold Star all the time. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of the press conference, Ruan Han Xing was making final preparations and giving orders to her assistants. The husband asked if she was still busy, but she was still busy with final confirmations. The girl saw a box in her husband's hands out of the corner of her eye and was curious about what was in it. Ho Chen said it was a sign of his gratitude. Ho Chen said he wanted to put it up for auction, and since they were playing for the lot, he could put it up for the maximum price. Han Xing picked it up and was amazed that it was her husband's favorite watch, and he assured her that he would not be able to support his wife's business without some investment. She thanked Ho Chen, and then called him to come with her, assured that the press conference was about to start. The guests were sitting in the hall. The host politely asked Mr. and Mrs. Ho to come in. Chen expressed his gratitude to the guests for their visit, and hoped that they would be able to purchase the desired lots today. Looking at his wife in a chic dress, he became worried. He decisively took off his jacket and threw it over Han Xing's shoulders. Chen stated that the room was quite cool, and his beloved wife should not have caught a cold. The beauty briefly thanked her husband. The boy told his friend that the heating was on full blast, so Mr. Ho's excuse was too meager. He told Mr. Wu that Madame Ho was not a delicate fading flower, but Mr. Ho simply had too old-fashioned thinking. The young man assured that if such a beauty were his wife, he would allow her to dress however she wanted. Huo Chen insisted that his wife was not a fading flower, but no matter how independent and capable she would always be surrounded by care and love in his heart. Mr. Ho told the boys that since they were not married, it would be difficult for them to understand, and Han Xing thought that this was what determined the competitiveness of men. Feng Chen stood on the stage and asked for a welcome to the presentation of the film View, saying that he was its director, and then he introduced his investor, Miss Ruan Han Xing. The guy said that the main action of the film took place in the western region of their hometown. Feng Chen said that while discussing the script, he and Miss Ho discovered another side of the western region, its ancient charm. The guests began to murmur. They asked questions in surprise. Han Xing and the director's faces darkened. Nala, Gu Zhao's mistress, spoke up. The girl asked what good could come out of such a wretched place as the Western District, and she saw its ancient charm as just a piece of urban sludge. Mr. Gu supported this and said that Miss Ho invested in an unknown director only to start developing the Western region. Ruin Hanxing smiled and replied that this circumstance should not bother Mr. Gu in any way. Nala came close and said that the Gu family was planning to develop the Eastern region, and so if Mrs. Ho were to develop the Western region, she would be going against young Master Gu. She called the Western region dirty and full of illiterate people. Hanxing replied that it was because of people like this that the gap between the rich and the poor in the city widened, and many people were unable to help themselves. Nala asked what was wrong with telling the truth. She claimed that the Western area was a slum, and no matter how well it was presented, it would still be that way. The girl said that the area was shabby and the people were rotten. She assured that Ruin Hanxing was the representative of that rottenness. Nala gritted her teeth and reminded him that she was young Master Gu's girlfriend, and asked how Hanxing dared to beat her. But Ruin didn't care whose woman she was, and she was ready to beat up anyone she didn't like. Master Gu was indignant that Madame Huo had hit his man, and that she had lost face because of her character. Hanxing reminded him that the boy was only the second youngest son of the Gu family. Even if he claimed the inheritance, Gu Zhuo was still standing in his way. The girl said that she herself was the wife of the head of the Ho conglomerate, and therefore she should not lose face because of a person like him. Gu Zhao was furious and asked who gave Ruan the right to talk to him like that. But then someone grabbed the guy by the shoulder from behind. It was Ho Chen himself. He said briefly, "I am." Master Ho said that Mr. Gu was too arrogant. He was surprised that he was raised like that in his family, and he said that he was ready to talk about it with their grandfather Gu. Zhao didn't know what to say. His mistress was confused, and a guy nearby was asking his friend why he didn't help his brother. But the friend didn't care about him, because his brother was a pain in the ass. The boy thought to himself that he needed to quickly take control of all the affairs in the Gu family. After all, once he gained power, no one would dare to argue with him. Hanxing, on stage and holding a microphone, apologized to the guests for the slight delay. The girl said that she had also discovered one problem now. It was the existing prejudices towards the residents of the Western region. Ruan Han said that this area was like an old man who couldn't keep up with the times. But if you slow down for a while, you can see its beautiful side. Feng Chen said that his film The View would show viewers a more realistic Western region in all its glory. And to mark the occasion, they were going to offer the opportunity to get the lead role in the film at auction. The guests began to talk among themselves in surprise. Some even thought it was funny. Another gentleman said that Mrs. Ho had invested in the film and that it was a chance to collaborate with her. Hanxing said that other small items would also be auctioned, and half of the proceeds would be donated to director Feng's film, and the other half would be donated to the needs of the Western region. Madame Ho announced the beginning of the auction. The husband shook hands and said that his dear had done a great job. She assured that all this was for the sake of the Western district of their hometown. Hanxing assured that if there was an opportunity to develop the Western region, she would make every effort to do so. Feng Chen stood at the podium. He said that Mrs. Ho had put up the first lot for auction, the audition for the lead role in the film View, and he announced the starting price at 10,000. Offers of 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 were heard. The guests became animated. One young man, number 3, assured that Mrs. Ho's words touched him deeply, and wanting to help, he offered 1 million for the lot. Then the bet went up to 1.5 million. This was participant number 2. He was not sure of the lady's rightness, but wanted to support her good intentions. The third participant raised to 2 million, and assured that he would not let his lot be stolen. Ho Chen participated under number 1. He put 5 million, and assured that he would not let his wife be stolen from him. The figure of 6 million was mentioned, but it was beaten by a proposal of 8. Then 10 was offered. The passions among the participants grew. But then the participant who had not been active before announced the amount of 18 million. Hanxing turned her head towards the voice. Ruin couldn't understand what the girl was doing here. At number 29 sat Gu Ju, the third daughter of the Gu family. Our heroine remembered from her previous life that old man Gu wanted his granddaughter to inherit all the family property. Then grandfather Gu, the head of the family, looked at Ju's work and realized her talent for business. And Ruin thought, if she and Gu Ju developed the Western region together, then Gu Zhao would not become an influential person like he had been in her previous life. The boys looked at each other and wondered what Gu Zhu was doing here. They were angry that she had outbid them with such a high price. One told his friend not to stare at his sister like that, and he insisted that she was clearly not right for the guy. Meanwhile, no one else raised the bid. Feng Chen counted down to 3 and announced the amount for which the lot was sold to participant number 29. Congratulations were heard towards the young lady on winning the main lot of the auction. Han Xing congratulated Miss Gu on winning the auction. She sincerely thanked Zhu for his contribution to the development of the Western region, and she introduced herself as the organizer of this event. The girls shook hands with each other. The brunette introduced herself and assured that she had heard about Han Xin and was glad to finally meet her in person. In the living room, the girls continued their conversation. Gu Zhu insisted that she was not really that interested in the leading role, but she would be interested in entering into a partnership and helping to develop the city. The girl handed the documents to Han Xing. It was an ideal program of investment, development, and consolidation. And Zhu herself, in the opinion of our heroine, was a real business sorceress. Unfortunately, Gu Zhu was unable to realize herself in her past life. With such a business mind, the girl was a hindrance to Gu Zhao, and no matter how hard the girl tried, she was unable to resist her brother's intrigues. As a result, Zhu fell into a trap and was left without her investments. It was the dirty video recording that became the brand of the young lady. Then her naked body began to flash on social networks. Gu Zhu could not cope with the gossip and committed suicide. Here on the phone screen, our heroine saw her childhood friend Shen. Han Xing thought that the girl had given up her dream of becoming an actress in this life. Feng Chen looked at the photo and assured that the girl in the photo had a strong aura, and her eyes were expressive. This was what was needed for the film. Han Xing remembered that she had promised herself that she would never let Shen Nan into the entertainment industry, lest something bad happen. But she also knew that she had enough resources to protect her friend now. Miss Ho said that everything depended on the director himself, and she reminded him of her promise not to interfere in the final casting. But she promised to come to the audition. An apology for being late was heard in the studio. Our heroine thought that she had not seen her friend Shen for a long time, and she was interested in how things were going for her. Feng Chen was about to introduce the main investor who had just arrived. The girls made direct eye contact. Shen couldn't resist being the first to throw herself into her friend's arms. She was happy to see her and asked her friend if she missed her. Han Xing insisted that she missed him. She justified herself by saying that she had been busy lately and had not had the opportunity to visit. She also asked whether Xiao Bai had led an honest life. It turned out that the guy was working part-time to save money to get back into college. Han thought it was a result of her previous advice to the guy. Khan was happy for the guy and asked the reason for her friend's visit, assuming that she still dreamed of a career as a film actress. The friend confirmed her intention to become the queen of cinema. The girl was glad that Shen wanted to fulfill her dream, but she thought that it was not so easy to achieve success in the entertainment industry. And she was afraid that she could be hurt. Shen recalled that when her friend got married, they were afraid for her that she would be mistreated and hurt. But she assured them that the film industry was much more dangerous than they could imagine. The girl assured that she always dreamed of becoming an actress, but never had a chance to prove herself. But now she would not want to refuse such an opportunity. Han Xing softened. It turned out that even after many years she could not convince her stubborn friend. She declared her desire to become as strong as her and shine together. Feng Chen called the girl to audition. Shen Nan called her friend and investor to attend her audition. The candidate for the role hurried off to prepare, and Han Xing promised herself that if the girl couldn't handle it, she would ask director Feng to replace the actress, and she was going to see if she had talent. Feng Chen informed Mrs. Huo that he was ready to begin. Han Xing gave orders that if the candidate failed the audition, she would be replaced. The day before, Han Xin and the director discussed what part of the script should be taken for the acting audition. The girl believed that the second part of the scene was more difficult, and that it was precisely with her that they should have tried. She was sure that this was the only way to determine the suitability of the candidate. Han Xing commanded with a decisive voice to begin. The camera operator started recording the camera. The heroine sat alone at the table. She was indignant that she was sold to an old man for 8,000 yuan. Tears welled up in her eyes. The girl jumped up and asked how this could be done after all those years of trying to do the best for this family. and she assumed that it was only because she was a girl. The heroine was offended that she was simply a slave at their disposal, or simply an object that could be sold and bought. The director praised the actress's performance, praising her skill level. He said that Shen played beautifully in front of the camera, and the ability to convey the character's personality was the most valuable thing for the script. He was glad that the girl lived up to his expectations. Shen, smiling, modestly thanked him for the good review. Khan was surprised that her friend had no formal training, and that her ability seemed like a blessing from heaven. She was determined not to let the actress's talent and genius go to waste. Feng Chen said that Shen Nan's emotionless silence and the stupefied, confused look in her eyes were all well controlled. After all, the same facial expression and body language expressed different emotions. Han Xing suggested casting Shen Nan in the role and releasing pilot footage to warm up the public. That's what they agreed on. The director showed the young talent in the script that she had not quite understood something correctly. Shen listened to him attentively. Our heroine decided for herself, looking at her friend, that since she had chosen the path of a movie star, she should allow herself to be her companion. Soon, director Feng Chen posted a short announcement and footage of the main character Shen Nian auditioning on social media. And the aspiring actress immediately gained fans. Young Master Gu insisted that Wang Zheng should have known very well who he could completely rely on in order to maintain his current status in Suyan's entertainment. He nodded his head. The young man, squinting his eyes angrily and drawing his eyebrows together, said that he simply couldn't stand it when someone was better than him. The man asked Mr. Gu to take a look, and opening the door he asked the gentleman to take a look. The director introduced the young Ruan Wei Xing, and assured that this pretty person had a soft, docile character. Wang Zheng quietly whispered into the master's ear that the beauty was also Ruan Han Xing's younger sister. The girl introduced herself with her full name, but she allowed herself to be called simply Xing Xing. Mr. Gu thought that this was a cuter version of Ruan Han Xing. He was pleased with this acquaintance. A handshake took place. Mr. Gu pulled Wei Xing towards him, and in a cheeky tone he said that with such a pretty face she would not go unnoticed. The girl boldly answered that everything depended on the second young Master Gu, whether the guy would want to support her. Tom didn't like the way the girl addressed him, and he demanded to be called simply Mr. Gu. After all, he considered himself the only one in the family who had achieved all the heights on his own. Wei Xing assured that she had heard about his power. Otherwise she would not have come to him here. The guy admitted that she was quite perceptive, and since he took her as an assistant, he promised to thank her for that. And in the meantime, he offered to take his credit card. Mr. Gu ordered Wang Zheng to take care of his assistant's appearance. He asked her not to worry about it and to do everything to the highest standard. And Wei Xing assured that in that case they would definitely work together. And she thanked Mr. Gu, promising not to let him down. Young Gu thought that it was like God's help had come. He was surprised to meet a girl who was as beautiful as Ruan Han Xing. The guy smiled, and mentally asked Han Xing if she was really going to confront him. Wei was a little sad that she would now have to imitate her sister, but she had to not let Mr. Gu down. And if it weren't for Zhu Xiaoyang, she would never have done it. But it was all for the sake of investment. The boy asked which of Wei's plans had worked. After all, after so many attempts, the Ho family was still on top. The girl said that she should have listened to her mother, and she should have gone to Ho's family, but his sister wouldn't want to get involved with him. Wei Xing thought that if she had known in advance that Xiaoyang was such a slippery guy, she would not have gotten involved with him. The man wanted to know where Mrs. Ruin was rushing to. He said that Mr. Gu had asked him to give her a present. The girl saw 2 packages in the director's hands. Wei Xing thanked her, and Wang Zheng asked why the girl was sweating so much, and drops of sweat were rolling down from her. As Lady Ruin left, she thought she was scared to death, but she couldn't let Wang Zheng know that she was panicking. Now she could start acting. After all, her sister wanted to become much more powerful than Ruan Han Xing and take back everything that belonged to her. The next day, our heroine sat in the studio and read the script. There were working moments of filming. Feng Chen showed the young aspiring actress where she should pay attention to certain points, and assured her that a reasonable view was important here. Han Xing began to feel sleepy from all this. Then her phone rang. It was Gu Zhu. She said that she had sent her assistant to Ho's house to get a cooperation agreement, and she wanted to warn him about it. Miss Gu also said that Gu Zhao's company had signed a contract with Ruan Weixing, and they were going to invest heavily in one project. She assumed that her brother had a grudge against Han Xing, and it was not the first time that he tried to pacify her. Our heroine thanked her interlocutor for the information. She replied that she was not against sharing something like that. And with that, the girls said goodbye. And the news came out on the feed. Director Wang Jung presented his exclusive contract with Miss Ruan Wei-shi, and he praised her in every way. The comments were mixed. Some laughed at the image, some associated it with Han Xing, and some found it cute. Wang Jung reported that the girl was preparing to star in one of his science fiction masterpieces. Everyone knew it was going to be a great movie about the future. Han Xing noted that there was still cause for concern. Feng Chen asked what was the matter, and he exchanged surprised glances with the young aspiring film actress Sheng Nan. Wang Jung proudly announced that they would be using this filming location today. He asked why they were frozen, and told them to pack their things and get out of here. Ruan Han Xing only now sadly realized what was happening. Feng Cheng became furious and demanded an explanation. He stated that they had already managed to unpack their things. Wang Zheng assured with a mischievous smile that Mr. Gu had paid double the rent that morning, so this studio was now theirs to use. The young talent Shen could not understand how such people were allowed to make films. The novice director got really carried away and was about to use brute force. But Han Xing stopped him in time. She quietly whispered and asked him to write everything down. The man told Mrs. Ho to take her people away from here, and asked not to turn everything into a conflict. She in response impudently and defiantly asked what they would do if they did not leave here. Wei Xing assured her sister that they had a contract in their hands, and with a satisfied look she asked her to accept that she had been ousted. She said that the entire future of the film industry was tied to money, and she insisted that her sister could continue to use the studio if she invested a lot of money in it. Our heroine noticed that Wei Xing had changed her style, and she assumed that she had decided to imitate her. The sister asked what they were talking about, and pretended to be surprised and not understanding. Han Xing assured that the clothes she wore were similar to her style of clothing. However, her sister should remember that there was something she could never copy. Wei Xing said that she was only taking what was hers. After all, she believed that her sister had taken away her happy marriage and bright future. The elder sister assured that it was Wei Xing's mother who ruined her life when she appropriated her family's wealth, and it was she who insisted that her stepdaughter marry a disabled man. And the sister was lucky that Han Xin took her unenviable place. And only then Wei Xing noticed the recording of their conversation, which was conducted by director Feng Chen. And she cursed her sister with bad words. And then, realizing that she was being recorded, she decided to justify herself, that it was the vile Ruan Han Xing who tried to set her up, and forced her to say unpleasant things, and then post this recording on the internet. Our heroine insisted that her sister had said it all herself, and the recording was simply proof of that. And she advised her poor sister to start getting treatment, and not to start an acting career. Wei Xing claimed that it was just a studio and demanded that she give in as a sister. Someone came in, and he said that Madame Ruin was taking on too much. Both girls were surprised and wary. Mrs. Gu handed over the contract for the purchase of the studio to Han Xing, and she assured that now she decides who should leave here. And if she was the owner, then why should she give in? The partner said that today she overheard that Gu Zhao was going to rent a studio, and since she was fortunately nearby, she decided to be prudent. Wei Xing angrily asked how it was possible to do this, and suggested that they go in the order of the live queue. The sister reminded her that the entertainment industry was all about money. Wei Xing said that this was not the only studio in the building, and she could rent the one next door. The assistant spoke up and apologized to Miss Ruin. She said that in addition to this studio, others had also been acquired by Huo's company and were closed to the public. They all now belonged to Mrs. Ruin Han Xing. The sister thought that she had nowhere to put the money, and she herself was amazed that an entire building had been purchased. Gu was afraid that her brother could do something similar. Wei Xing couldn't calm down and accused the girls of lying, but she politely asked her to watch her words. Han Xing smiled slyly and asked her sister if it was time for them all to leave here. Looking at Wei Xing, she said that she could help her. Assuring that the dark red was also red, she said that it was time for them to go. Her sister's face twisted into a grimace. The girl thought that Ruin Han Xing had done her duties as a wife too well, and that Mr. Huo had been charmed by her. She realized that there was only one way out. Wei Xing dialed the number on her smartphone. She introduced herself with an informal name. She informed Mr. Gu that the studio that was rented today had been bought out by Ruin Han Xing, but he replied that it was possible to rent another one. The girl informed that all the studios in this building were bought by Ho's company, and such actions showed their disrespect towards him. Mr. Gu asked his interlocutor to save her sharp words for later. The girl said that she wanted to get more money from him. He replied that he could do that, but he asked Wei Xing what benefit she brought. He was not satisfied with a living doll. The girl only clenched her teeth in anger at his remark. The girl said that she could have brought Ruan Hanxing straight to his bed. She assured that her sister was arrogant, and if the truth about her wicked life came out, her entire future would be trampled. Young Master Gu agreed to entrust this to Wei Xing, and assured that as soon as he received what they had agreed on, her fee would immediately increase threefold. The interlocutor thanked her, and she thought that her sister's happy days were coming to an end, and the young man thought that he would enjoy every inch of Ruan Hanxing's body, while she would feel sorry for herself. Night had fallen over the Huo family mansion. The sky was clear and starry. The wind gently rustled the leaves of the trees in the garden. Hanxing thanked her husband for such an unexpected surprise. Chen was pleased with himself and happy for his wife, and he assured that he thought that one studio might not be enough, so he decided to buy everything in that building. He was surprised that his wife always thanked him, but he believed that this was his duty as a husband. Then the girl received a new message on her phone. She read it with a serious expression on her face. Ho Chen became worried and asked what had happened. His wife told him that Ruan Wei Xing had posted about the film festival on Weibo. She decided to publicly invite her sister. Chen asked if she wanted to go and assured her that it was not necessary. Han Xing assured him that she wanted to go. After all, a fairly large company had invited her to participate as an investor in the film Searching. Moreover, she was sure that Ruan Wei Xing didn't even know that the film festival would be broadcast live. She wanted her to experience the sinister side of society. A few days later, all the Ho children sat on the sofa to watch the live broadcast of the film festival. Soon their brother and sister-in-law appeared on the screen. The beauty greeted the viewers. Soon, Ho Chen warned his wife that he would be leaving for a while. He assured her that he was going to talk to Mr. Gu, and asked her to tell him if she needed anything. Then Ho Chen's sister-in-law passed by and looked over her shoulder. He didn't even pay attention to her. Ruan Wei Xing approached her sister and asked her why she hadn't announced her arrival. She assured her that she was bored and took her hand. Han Xing asked what kind of hysteria she had thrown last time. The elder pulled her hand away, not wanting to have a dialogue with her. Wei Xing thought that her sister wanted to embarrass her even during the live broadcast. Wei presented a glass. The sister assured her that there would be no pita, and she said that she had heard about her breakup with Zhang Xiaoyang, and he kept talking about the skills of his ex-fiancé. Wei Xing didn't understand how they knew about this, and she was angry that her sister said this during the live broadcast. At this point, Mr. Gu arrived. He assured that Mrs. Ho's behavior and compassion were impressive, and he held the irritated Wei Xing with his hand. Coming very close, he continued his remark, saying that he hoped that Mrs. Ho would not lose her ardor in the future. Han Xing slapped him and asked if anyone had told him that when he was drunk, he shouldn't get close to people he was talking to. Mr. Ho seemed to say to his companion that Mrs. Ho was quite interesting, and he said goodbye to her. Han Xing watched the couple go. She decided that they actually complimented each other quite well. Afterwards, our heroine took a glass of drink from the nearest waiter. Without thinking twice, she drank its contents. Literally a few seconds later, her head started spinning. The girl couldn't understand what was happening to her. Our heroine leaned her elbows on the table. The dizziness was getting worse, and she guessed that the drink had been laced with drugs. The waiter approached the girl and asked if she wanted water. At this time, Khan apologized to viewers that they were forced to stop broadcasting live. The continuation can be viewed through people's streams. Once again, the young man offered to take Ruan to the restroom, but the girl said that she could walk there herself. Madam had a hard time climbing the stairs. The employee escorted her and gave her a key card. Our heroine took the key and asked him not to follow her. Looking at the room number on the map, it turned out that Han was staying right next to it. I opened the door to my room thinking that the waiter was somehow suspicious. When the door closed behind the girl, the waiter on the phone said that she was in room 316. The voice on the phone told him to take the card to Mr. Gu. Wei was very happy that the problem with Han was solved. Only Gu Zhao remained. Her sister dared to take away her fiancé and her right to happiness. Today, everything should return to its place. Mr. Ho will belong to her. She approached our hero and asked him to take up some of his time. but the guy replied that he had nothing to talk about with her. The girl asked if he knew about her connections. Ho said that it was the result of his wife's father's betrayal, and everyone had known about it for a long time. Sister continued that Mr. Huo didn't know why Ruin married him. A man with bad legs. I didn't understand. Didn't the husband guess that deep down his wife liked a completely different person? Why is she still with him? Isn't he interested? She offered the gentleman a drink and then told him everything. But our hero answered sharply that he didn't care about her guesses, so that the interlocutor would stop wasting his time. The guy is not interested in his wife's past before meeting him. Now he is only interested in their future together. If he wants, he can ask Khan about everything personally, and not listen to gossip from other people's dirty mouths. And there is no desire to talk to her specifically. Having expressed his opinion, our hero left. Vi watched him go and thought that he probably hadn't figured out his sister's personality yet. This handsome guy should belong to her. Even if he didn't drink from the glass, the drug's effect was still spread through the air. Ho Chen should treasure this day in the future. Our hero felt ill. The waiter received an order to take him to room 319. Taking the guy by the arm, he helped him get to the room. Mr. Ho resisted, but the hotel employee insisted that he was unwell and that he was helping him get there. The waiter opened the door of the room he needed and invited him in. Leaning against the wall, the guy thought it was very hot. Then he noticed the bed. There was someone lying on it with his head covered. The first thought was that they wanted to set him up. Pulling the covers off the bed, he thought that he had spent a lot of time building up his reputation and authority over the years, and he would not let some woman undermine him. Our hero was simply stunned by the picture that appeared before him. His beloved wife was sleeping soundly and quietly on the bed. Wai admired herself in the mirror and thought that Gu was already having fun with Han. Today, everyone would get what they wanted. The girl didn't expect that everything would go so quickly and without obstacles. Ho Chen's first night belonged to her. Our heroine's sister entered the right room and took off her clothes on the go. She was very happy that Mr. Ho finally belonged to her. When Khan woke up, she had a very bad headache. When she saw the man, she got angry and threw him on the bed, saying, "Don't touch me, and how did you get here?" Our hero calmed the woman down and said that he was her husband. He said that apparently his beloved was also under the influence of drugs. The couple laughed, which meant they were both under the influence of drugs. Not only was the guy drugged, but the effect was very strong. The girl hugged her beloved and said that he needed to drink more hot water. Mr. Ho asked if she was really so worried about her husband. Khan kissed him and replied that she couldn't worry about her beloved. The guy hugged her tightly and his body radiated an unbearable desire to possess her. But to his great regret, his beloved fell asleep sweetly in her husband's arms. Having carefully placed the girl on the bed, he left. Our hero went into the bathroom and started pouring water over himself. He tried to cool down. Ruin trusted him so much that she fell asleep in his arms. He almost did it. He completely lost his composure when he was near the person he liked. After bathing, the young man called his subordinate and ordered him to find out who had bought drugs in our city over the past week. The report was to be ready by tomorrow morning. Mr. Ho prepared tea and wanted to give it to his beloved, but she continued to sleep soundly. Even looking at the sleeping woman, he could not control his uncontrollable desire to merge with her. Finally, our heroine woke up. Her whole body ached very badly. Apparently, the drug was very strong. The girl saw her husband sitting next to her. Both of them mentally recalled the events of the night, during which they had hardly slept. Ho spoke first and said he didn't understand how she could have been drugged. The girl replied that she had drunk a glass of juice and was escorted to her room. She simply couldn't move on her own. Our hero replied that they were both drugged, but it was very lucky that they ended up in the same room by mistake. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The wife expressed her opinion that she already had a suspect, and it was her sister Wai. Mr. Ho said that unfortunately there was no evidence. The girl opened the door and was about to leave and answered her husband that it was okay because they were here for a long time. From the bathroom, our heroine asked her husband if he had taken a shower, because it was very slippery and there was a lot of water. Our hero thought it was yesterday, and then he remembered that he took a shower in the morning. His thoughts were interrupted by his other half, who quietly whispered in his ear that it was worth rewarding her husband for a sleepless night. The guy replied that Khan shouldn't worry about him, but the husband doesn't have the patience to wait long. The girl said she was hungry. She wanted to take a shower and then they would go have a snack together. Our heroine noticed how hotly he looked at her. Wai woke up and thought about what Ho Chen's reaction would be when he woke up and saw her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a male voice asking, "Why you?" The girl got scared and asked why you were here. Thoughts flashed through her head that it was Mr. Gu. Why was he the one in the room? Where did the miscalculation occur? The guy asked again who she expected to see. He assumed that she wanted to use the previous night to strengthen her relationship with Ho. But Wai cried and said that it was her first time. She couldn't give it away so easily. Gu mockingly replied that he had heard about his sister. Didn't she like it at night? But then he thought that it really was the girl's first time. And fortunately, he was using protection. The girl interrupted his thoughts and, swallowing tears, said that her reputation right now is not the best. She's not that kind of person. She just wanted to get revenge on her sister, but she didn't know she'd crossed the line. Mr. Gu sternly ordered her to get dressed. At that moment, he was thinking about how to console her. But he said out loud that it was his fault, and he would be held responsible. Two couples collided in the hallway. Vi turned to her sister in surprise and asked if she was there too. Our heroine grabbed her interlocutor and shoved a pill into her mouth. With the words that there are no extra eyes here, no need for this whole performance. Vi screamed and asked what her sister had given her. Our heroine told her to think about what she had done last night. So she repaid in kind. Then she took her husband by the arm and said that some people do not understand human speech at all. Therefore, there is no point in continuing the conversation. When the couple walked away from his sister, Mr. Ho asked what kind of pill it was. Han replied that it was just a regular vitamin. She just wanted to scare Wai. Our schemer thought for a long time and could not understand why the rooms were mixed up. What went wrong? Then she turned to Mr. Gu and asked him if he had promised to take responsibility, whether those words were true or not. The guy agreed and Vi asked him to invest in her. He assured her that he would provide her with the best conditions and resources. Pressing herself against him, the girl thought that Gu wasn't so bad. And Ruin was an abandoned girl that even her father had rejected. A beggar like Han can't compare to Vi. She has a lot of opportunities now, and she will drag her sister to the very bottom. Our hero was working in his office. His beloved was lying on the sofa and scrolling through her phone in the same room. I suddenly saw in the newsfeed that she had invested in the rising actress of the film Searching Shen Nan. However, this girl is dating a gangster. Can she become a star? The next headline is that the girl had a conflict with Vi and they almost fought. Han stood up and decided to walk to the set. In her head, she thought that her sister was very cunning, and Shen would not be harmed. On the set, the director and the main character of the film were talking. Ruin came up to them and asked the girl why she was sad. After all, she hadn't done anything wrong. Sheng replied that she was very sorry. A few days ago, Xiaobai was sick and she visited him. She brought him gifts and medicine. But because of this, before she could finish speaking, our heroine tried to calm the girl down and said that she would figure everything out herself. An unfamiliar girl was sitting to the side and watching the film crew. Khan asked the director who this stranger was. The guy replied that it was Wen Qing. She is known as the Queen of the Screen. She came to watch because he had been persuading her for a long time. Now these rumors have surfaced about the main character. The observer is known for her straightforwardness. And then Ruin decided that she needed to act. She approached the stranger and introduced herself as the investor of this film, Ruin Han Xin. The girl also said in response that she was Wen Qing. She came because she liked the script, but she didn't think that the actress would be upset because of the gossip of the yellow press. Wen was very disappointed by this disrespect, so she decided that she did not want to cooperate anymore. But our heroine began to dissuade the guest. She said that she had misunderstood everything. It would be better to read the script before making a decision. She added that Wen had been in this industry for a long time and should understand Shen. But Wen did not understand what our heroine meant. Ruin continued that the actress was a complete newbie in this field. But she was doing very well. The guest agreed that Shen was fine and left. The director turned to Mrs. Ho. He did not understand what to do now. After all, because of Shen's scandal, the guest might not support them. Then I saw the news on my phone and Han read it. Wen wrote that she visited the set with the actress. A very nice and polite girl. Why the author of this post wrote this is unclear. The boy was glad that Mrs. Qing helped them. Han noted that she had plenty of courage. Their conversation was interrupted by the actress. The girl said that Wen is very wonderful, but she often gets injured and walks around with bruises. But when asked what happened, she always answers that it was an accident. Our heroine said that it was time to sort things out. Turning away from everyone, she wrote a post stating that all comments about Shen were lies. Ruin saved them and will definitely go to court. That the guy and the girl from the post are not in any relationship. They are childhood friends of our heroine. She grew up with them. Their relationship can only be called family, and she thought that now everything was over. Shen saw Han's comment and was very happy, because everyone immediately changed their minds. A man with a camera suddenly ran up to our heroine and introduced himself as a member of a film crew in the mountains. They wanted to invite Mr. and Mrs. Ho to take part in their show. Our heroine responded sharply that she was not interested in such things. But the guy continued that the essence of the show is that they send celebrities to the mountains of the western region, invited them to experience the real beauty of the world. The girl couldn't wait for the film crew to finally leave. Then she agreed to take part in their show. Scrolling through the program of the show, Khan was puzzled why the invitation came so suddenly. It seemed they had some kind of plan. Perhaps her husband received an invitation too. Returning home to the mansion, Mr. Ho invited his wife to take a look and handed her an invitation. Our heroine was not surprised. Our hero continued that he checked the show organized by Xingshui Company. Gu Zhao and Ruan Wei are also invited. The wife replied that Mr. Gu was the investor of this company. The girl did not understand why they would film their show in the western region. The guy said that it seemed like there were other goals there. Ruan said that we should be careful. But the popularity of the project is high and she was very worried about advertising. She thought that everything should be taken care of. Our irresistible Ho couple arrived at the site in Xicheng district. Taking off her glasses, our heroine looked around the area and thought that the development of the western region could not be postponed. It's time to allocate funds for it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar female voice. Her sister got out of the car and was indignant that the place was shabby and very dirty. It's funny that someone wants to develop this revenge. I went to Van and said that it's better not to waste your nerves on his development. The people from this place are too low level. Wen Qing passed by the sisters at this time and heard their conversation. She expressed her opinion that in her opinion, some people from big cities are even worse than country people. Their hearts are too dirty. Her husband took her hand and told her that they had to go. The girls became quiet as the couple passed them. Then Ruan whispered in Vi's ear that the show would be broadcast live, so she had to be careful. She admitted that she had a recording of her sister buying drugs and something else. If Mr. Gu knew that the first time was fake, he would have treated her just as well. Then she turned and addressed Mrs. Wei. She didn't expect her family to take part in the show. The girl replied that her husband was invited, so she decided to participate too. Ruan thanked her interlocutor for her help. She said that if it weren't for her, they would have been in big trouble. Wen replied that she was stating the facts and nothing more. Our heroine took her hand and admitted that in the entertainment industry, few people tell the truth. Suddenly, her gaze was riveted on the hand of her interlocutor. There was a huge bruise on her. Miss Ho asked where she got hurt. The conditions in the current shows are not the best. If you get injured, you need to treat it as soon as possible. Han thought it didn't look like an injury. Then she remembered what Shen had told her that afternoon at the studio, that the Screen Queen Wei was amazing, but she got injured very often. She is constantly covered in bruises. Could this be domestic violence? Her thoughts were interrupted by Mrs. Qing, who was trying to hide the bruise under her clothes and said that she accidentally hit herself and everything was fine. But our heroine insisted that such things should not be hidden. After all, Wei is a good person, and good people should not suffer. Suddenly, Ma Yinan, Madame Qing's husband, appeared and said that his wife was not being pushy and that they needed to go. The Screen Queen thanked Ruan for her kindness and said she had to go. Her husband grumbled that he shouldn't have taken her along. Han watched the couple and thought that there was definitely something wrong with this guy. Her thoughts were interrupted by the host, who said through a megaphone that welcome to the show Sunrise on the Mountain. They invited 4 couples, and the program would be broadcast live. He hoped that the guests would be able to feel the atmosphere of the western region. Mr. Gu casually said that it was time for people to see all the poverty. Maybe even someone would want to invest in him. Our hero replied that there was no need to speak with such disdain. Vi tried to calm her beloved. She told him not to pay attention. People around him would see everything as soon as the program went on air. Then I turned to the director and asked. After all, he said that 4 couples would be present, but it turned out that there were only 3. The male voice apologized for being late. The girl holding Xiaoyang said that the road was not very good, so there was no need to hurry. Both sisters turned around and saw their brother. Their thoughts were exactly the same, that he was following them everywhere. The girls, who had been constantly arguing and competing with each other for the last time, agreed with each other for the first time. The brother turned to Khan and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The girl tried to distract him but to no avail. Our heroine replied that they were not that well acquainted. But the guy insisted and said that he had sent many messages, and she did not answer. Suddenly, Mr. Ho came up, hugged his wife and threatened Xiao not to touch his wife and to show respect. Ruin also loudly told him not to touch her. The girl took his hand and asked if Brother Yang was okay. He rudely replied that he was pressing too hard. Mrs. Ho watched the scene and was confused. Could it be his girlfriend? How could she fall in love with such a loser? The director called everyone and said that it was time to get down to business. From this moment on, there would be a live broadcast. The show program staff would deliver the participants' luggage to their place of residence. Then everyone will have to go to the market to buy ingredients for dinner. The budget is 20 yuan. The camera started rolling. They started filming the show and the comments started pouring in. What kind of program is this? Ruin Wei is a beauty. The live broadcast suddenly turned on. Here is the queen of the screen and her husband. Enough gossip already. Ruin and her husband look very good as if they came from heaven. Wei asked if they could buy all the ingredients for only 20 yuan. The people in the Western District were so pathetic. She started reading the internet comments about the show on her phone. Some wrote that she was a beauty. Some said that this money would not be enough for her and that her partner would help. People wrote that it was time for the rich to take care of the well-being of the Western region. But are they really capable of this? Mr. Gu interrupted her thoughts and said that 20 yuan was a huge amount for this area. There was no need to make an issue out of it. Our heroine thought that she hadn't been to the market for a long time. As a child, she was a real expert. Mr. Ho was confident in his wife and expected the dinner to be amazing. Wei approached the girl's brother and introduced herself. The girl responded by saying that her name was Li Mian. The sister continued that the girl's boyfriend was doing something wrong when he chased other girls. The girl didn't understand because Han was Wei's sister. But she continued that their relationship wasn't that smooth. Even though she was her sister, it didn't cost her anything to sleep with someone else's guy. The interlocutor became sad and quietly said that she was not as beautiful as Ruin, but she liked brother Xiao Yang. But Wei interrupted her and continued that it wasn't that the girl wasn't good enough. If Han hadn't shown up, the girl's boyfriend would be with her now. She set Li up so that she would teach Mrs. Ho a lesson, so that she would understand that she shouldn't take away someone else's things. But the girl did not understand how this was possible. Her sister again insisted that she was returning what belonged to her. And then this very young girl thought, after all, she really had always been too weak and it was time to change. The husband of the screen queen grumbled at the market that these stinking products cannot be tasty. But the girl claimed that she had already chosen the best of the current assortment, and it was fresh. The guy grabbed the products from the counter and said loudly, "Aren't these better?" And the wife responded in fear that they are more expensive. Our heroine watched the couple in silence, then suddenly came up to them and asked what the young people were doing. The screen queen's husband turned around and answered that Mrs. Ho needed it. Ruin reprimanded Mr. Ma for his inappropriate treatment of his wife. The guy thanked her for the advice and said that he shouldn't meddle in other people's affairs. Han continued that Screen Queen Wei had helped her a lot recently. She thought that Mr. Ma was about to hit her and rushed to help. The young man said with anger in his voice that he had never raised his hand against a woman. Then he turned to his wife and told her to go shopping alone, and he left. Our heroine began to stroke the Screen Queen's hand and said that she should resist and fight back. If she tolerated it, the situation would get worse. The girl thanked her for the advice. Suddenly, Li ran up and started yelling at Mrs. Ho, claiming that she was seducing her man. Ruin didn't understand what was going on. Then she looked closer and realized that it was Zhang Xiaoyang's girlfriend. The girl continued to scream and tell her to stop seducing him. But Khan replied that it was time for her eyesight to be checked. Li didn't stop and continued interrogating why Mrs. Ho was stalking her boyfriend, why she couldn't leave him alone. Our heroine, saying, "It's time to clarify who is bothering whom," showed her interlocutor her phone. Xiao wrote that he missed her, asked her to come over and all that stuff. The girl picked up the phone and couldn't believe it. Ruin asked if she now understood who was bothering whom. Li kept saying that if Ruin hadn't flashed before Xiao's eyes, then he wouldn't have run after her. Han looked at the girl and realized that she was hopeless. She asked who was inciting her to do this, but she rushed to fight, screaming that Mrs. Ho had done something to him. The queen of the screen tried to stop Li and push her back, but it turned out that she pushed and the girl fell into a bowl of fish. Suddenly, Mrs. Ho heard her husband's voice behind her, saying that he had bought vegetables. She turned around and saw a film crew behind her husband. She extended her hand to Lee to help him stand up, but the girl resisted. Then our heroine said that there was a cameraman behind her husband, and if she didn't stand up, she would find herself in an awkward position. The girl thought about her rival, that she was a goddess, but then she still thought that she was bad. Suddenly, Mr. Ho came and asked his wife if everything was okay. Han answered that the girl slipped and fell, and she decided to help. The husband was glad that everything was okay with Ruin. Our heroine went to the fish seller and said that she would pay for the container with fish. The man did not understand why she needed so much fish. After all, it was impossible to eat so much, so there was no need to spend money. The culprit of this incident admired how Mrs. Ho tried to help with the consequences. She decided that there was nothing to worry about, and she could pay for it herself. Ruin laughed and asked the seller how many fish there were. The man replied that there were only 20. But our heroine was upset because she didn't have enough money. She had just given her husband 10 yuan for vegetables. But then the Screen Queen came to the rescue and Lee also gave 5 yuan. And then abruptly with the words, "bad woman," ran away. When she left, she thought that she needed to stay away from her. Our heroine did not understand such behavior. Then turning to the Queen of the Screen, she said that the area was very poorly developed, and the people here were very positive. The girl hoped that it would soon begin to prosper and develop. The interlocutor looked at Mrs. Ho and thought that she was different from the others and could help her. Then she asked it out loud. And Ruin, looking into her eyes, asked again whether she had thought it through and heard in response that the girl wanted to try. Wei watched this whole scene and decided that Lee was a real loser, and therefore something else had to be done. I didn't understand when Wen Qing managed to become so friendly with her sister. If things continue like this, it won't end well for her. Something needs to be done urgently. The director invited everyone to the set and said that everyone had bought the ingredients. Now it was time to cook it all. The husband of the Screen Queen made a remark to his wife that she shouldn't get close to people of a lower class. Nothing good will come of this. But Qing began to justify herself and said that Ruan was a very good girl. Her husband angrily said that she still dared to object to him. But their conversation was interrupted by Wei, who suggested that they team up. The couple both remained silent, and the girl took this as a sign of consent. Our heroine watched what was happening and did not understand what her sister was trying to achieve. Then she started cooking, but Xiao interrupted her and asked how he could help. Han rudely replied that she could do nothing. At this time, Mr. Ho watched his wife and mentally drove the scoundrel away from her. The wife suddenly said that she would go to the backyard to get firewood. But the guy said that he would bring it, and Ruin should rest. But our heroine decided that it would be difficult for the gentleman to distinguish quality firewood, and so she decided to do it herself. Wei quietly watched her sister. She decided that since she went alone, she would teach her a lesson. She approached the husband of the movie queen and said that she would help him. Mr. Yinan looked at the girl with distrust, but she interrupted his thoughts and continued that he also hated Ruin, just like his sister. The movie queen's husband asked Wei what was wrong. The girl replied that she did not like Ruin's superiority. She believed that some things should be decided by men. In society or in a family, the man always remains the main one. The guy listened to the interlocutor in silence and then agreed with her. Wei continued that a naughty woman cannot be too smart. There is a lot of firewood in the backyard, and it can be said that Han started a fire. The guy smiled and replied that even though she was Mrs. Ho, she was still just a woman. They should only be able to cook. The rest is done by men. Then he went into the yard to look around. Wei watched him go, thinking that the guy was upset because of her words. If it weren't for the cameras, no one would have agreed to do this. In the backyard, our heroine was choosing firewood. She decided that it was impossible to light a fire with them. They were too damp. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a lighter and asked who was there. Mr. Enan answered. The girl asked how she could help. Then she said that there was a lot of firewood here, so it was better to smoke somewhere else. The guy bragged that if the house burned down, he would be able to pay for it. But our heroine did not understand what he needed. With a grin, the gentleman said that a woman should sit at home with the children, clean, cook, and not meddle in other people's business. Then he threw the burning cigarette butt onto the firewood. And he added that Mrs. Ho didn't know what she was doing. Since her husband didn't care about his wife, he would take care of her. The girl put out her cigarette with her foot and called her interlocutor crazy. She added that there were a lot of people here and didn't he care about other people's lives? A bastard like him who behaved so outrageously deserved that the Khan taught him a lesson. The guy was outraged. How dare Mrs. talk to him like that? He promised that today he would show that there is a difference between a man and a woman. But our heroine didn't lose her head and hit him in the stomach with her knee. And then she told him to talk to his mommy like that. Maybe she'll break his legs for that. The guy grabbed the place where he had been hit and thought that this creature could fight. Khan wanted to hit him again, but he managed to grab her hand and said that he wouldn't fall for that trick twice. Our heroine twisted his arm behind his back and hit his manhood again. Mr. Inan howled in pain and shouted that she dare not hit him here. After all, she would have to pay for the damage later. Our heroine grabbed a big stick and swung it, saying that she would hit him again if he didn't shut up, that the guy is jealous and angry, that he even had a desire to take revenge on Mrs. Ho. Just for a few words that she said to his wife, Mr. Yinan angrily replied that women like our heroine should be beaten. After all, she considers herself superior to others but still relies on men. Ruin asked if he really did beat his wife. The guy agreed. In his defense, he said that Wei Qing considered himself an important person, only because of the title of the Queen of Cinema. But in their house, he is the boss, and the last word is always with the guy. If the wife does not obey, then he will beat her, until he makes it clear who is the real head of the family. The girl turned away and said that she was sick of such vile words and actions. And Mr. Inan replied that even if she told the press, they would not believe her. Khan showed him the phone and said that they wouldn't believe it even with this video. She just wanted to look for the difference between wet and dry firewood. But suddenly his mug got into the frame. The Ma and Huo families have many things in common. If Ruin dares to send out the video, it will do no good to anyone. Our heroine was furious at these words and told him to shut up. Then she hit the interlocutor and he lost consciousness. The girl wondered why problems haunted her. People who are looking for trouble on their butt constantly appear. Then she came to the kitchen where everyone was preparing dinner and said that Ma Yinan had hit the woodshed and lost consciousness. They had to go and check on him. Everyone was shouting that they needed an ambulance quickly, and Wei Qin silently continued cooking. Our heroine came up to her and quietly said that she had a video. In this video, the husband of the movie queen admitted that he beat her. Therefore, Han can dump it on the girl. Mrs. Qing continued to stir the food and thought that Ruin had helped her, and she had obtained evidence so quickly. In her head, images of her husband beating her and shouting that he loved her began to appear. She would never find a husband like that anywhere else. Could she? Really? Then she thanked Han Xin. Our heroine held vegetables in her hands and offered to look at the mess and cook dinner, otherwise they would remain hungry. Wei and his brother's girlfriend were trying to cook something. Li couldn't get the chicken into the pot. His sister was pouring some liquid into the same container where the bird was. Xiao watched this and thought that they wanted to poison him. The host of the show invited everyone to move on to the game part after dinner. Mr. Yinan looked at the chicken that was peeking out of the pot. Then, in a dissatisfied tone, he said that he got into trouble on the show and that's what he got as a result. But the host was in a great mood and was advertising wine. He said that this is what ladies like most at dinner. After all, today's special part is wine. It was made especially in the Western region. Wei didn't understand, because they had agreed with the director that the wine would be from the Western region. It was suddenly changed. Mr. Gu replied that Han was most likely to blame for this. Ruin drank wine little by little, but her husband was not happy. He knew that our heroine could not stand alcohol. He made a remark that she should drink less. But the girl objected that a little wouldn't hurt. Only 300 caddies of this wine could be produced in a year, and it was the signature drink of the Western region. So she decided to try it. Xiao also poured himself a glass and said that since it was so special, he wanted to try it too. Li replied that it was sweet and different from the ones she drank. Therefore, the girls should like it. Mr. Gu reminded the host about the game part. Wei also agreed because she was very bored. The guy showed the cards he was holding in his hand and asked everyone to take one. Whoever draws the main card can take the mobile phone of one of the participants and call the number from the phone book. If the winner can talk to the other person for 5 minutes, the show will donate 500,000 yuan to the Western region. Wei turned to the Ho couple and said they did not look scared. The sister replied that she would do everything in her power for the Western region. Then she smiled and added that if the person she was talking to had information on her phone that no one needed to see, it was better to hide it. Otherwise, they would find it. But Wei got angry and replied that she just wanted to joke. She didn't expect such a reaction from her sister and asked for forgiveness. Ruin said she was joking too. She made a remark that she was thinking too much. She also apologized if she made her feel awkward. Mr. Yinan pulled out a trump card and showed it to everyone. He said that he would choose card number 7. Wei was very happy that she got the 3 of hearts. Smiling, she said that she should see who would be lucky. Mrs. Ching said she had a 7. She handed her phone to her husband and said she knew the password. Taking the phone, he said that he would not be polite. In the evening when they return home, it does not matter whether it will be knees on the rubbing board, shoulders, or back. The girl thought that she couldn't let him behave like this any longer. She said out loud that everything was fine and that they had to start. A male voice came from the phone and answered in surprise. He said that where did Mrs. Wen get the time to call? But Inan told actor Kim that it was the lady's husband. The wife was not around and so he wanted to talk to him alone. But Kim Sung-hee, a movie star and director, said that he had nothing to talk about. If he needed anything, he could contact the actor's manager and wanted to hang up. But Mr. Yinan said that the other person was very arrogant. Does he really not care about Wen Qing's fate? And if he continues to talk like that, people will think that they are rivals. The movie queen watched her husband and was very surprised by such behavior. She thought that he was doing all this for the sake of hype. The voice on the phone answered sharply, so that Mrs. Chin's husband would not try to guess their relationship with such dirty guesses. Or just wanted to chat, the movie actor would simply hang up. But Mr. Yinan said he just wanted to thank Wen Qin for his recommendation, which helped his wife get the lead role. But the guy wasn't sure if this recommendation was without a specific purpose. After all, the director and the actress are a wonderful couple. Kim replied that he was an ordinary actor and aspiring director and could only recommend. Ching got the role based on her abilities, not her recommendation. Mr. Yinan agreed with his interlocutor and added that not only the actor's abilities played a role in this, but also the actor's care. Kim reiterated that he did not like Wen's husband's words. He personally contributed little to the success of her career. Even without a recommendation, she would have found a way to fame. After all, he is her husband and should understand his wife's seriousness and potential. Other people may say that she is lucky because of Kim, but her husband should not think so. After all, the girl trusted him with her life. Therefore, he must protect his wife. Otherwise, he saw no point in their marriage and there was silence. Inan wondered who was worthy of being Wen's husband. He said out loud that it seemed like actor Kim was not very happy with their marriage. Again, he thought that his wife was a flirt. She had never been honest with him. Then he asked the actor if these rumors were true and if he had feelings for his wife. Our heroine watched this and then said loudly, "Enough." She had never seen anyone who would take such initiative and seek the truth that does not exist. Inan asked Mrs. Ho again what this had to do with her, and the guy just followed the rules of the game. In general, what could a woman like Han know? She couldn't listen to others speak. His wife calmed him down. Mr. Ho intervened in the conversation and asked Yinan who gave him the right to talk to his wife like that. But the girl said that there was no need to talk to stupid people. But our hero insisted that he would not let his wife be harmed, to which she replied that a man who was born a bastard, the best way to teach him a lesson is to beat him up again. Then she turned over the chair on which the offender was sitting. He fell to the floor, and our heroine crushed him with her foot, saying that he was deliberately talking all sorts of nonsense. Inan howled to his wife for help, but Ruin stepped on him harder and asked if he could speak normally. Wen told Ruin that her husband had probably learned his lesson, but the girl didn't think so. The guy told his wife that he told her not to get involved with such people. They do terrible things. He rolled over from his stomach to his back, and at that moment Khan stepped on him again with all her might. The husband of the movie queen howled again and asked his wife to calm down the offender. Reminded her of the secret agreement. Mrs. Ching got nervous and asked our heroine to let him go. The girl noticed that Wen was afraid of something, and again she asked to let her husband go. Ruin took her foot away. The guy got up and hit his wife. He said that she had made a fool of him. Since she had made him embarrass himself, there was no point in keeping his wife's secret any longer. Wen was very scared and asked Yinan for forgiveness. She said she was wrong. The cameras were filming this conflict. Our heroine, next to the director who was filming, turned to the guy and said that if he doesn't shut up, otherwise she will show everyone the video where he confesses to domestic violence. The girl didn't know what they were talking about, but judging by the movie queen's face, she understood that it was a secret. Husband Wen replied that if she leaked the video, He would reveal his wife's secret to the public. If Ruin wanted to help, her wrong move would ruin her friend. Our heroine was angry with the interlocutor and tried to convince him that Chin was his wife. The guy uses her secret as a bargaining chip. This is what unscrupulous people do. Mr. Yinan said with a grin that he didn't see anything wrong with that. After all, his wife wouldn't be able to live the way she does without him. The wife reminded him that they had made a deal and he couldn't back out of it. The guy very rudely told her to shut up. The girl cried very hard. Ruin came up to her and said that she shouldn't tolerate it. Today her husband threatens her with a secret, and what could happen next time? Mrs. Ho insisted that Wen could not continue to live under his threats. She had to resist with all her might. The girl's head was filled with images from that most terrible day in her life, when the men tried to rape her. Then she thought that for her husband she was just a toy, an object to play with. After all, she never had human rights. Inan shouted at his wife that she had no right to set conditions for him. It was unclear to her what was more important, the future or freedom. Then there was no need to blame him for not warning her. If this video gets out, Wen's career will be over. The girl looked at him and thought that she would gain freedom and respect when she surrendered to him step by step. She was just so stupid that she believed the demon's words. And at that moment, Mrs. Qin screamed that she was demanding a divorce and that she had had enough. She mentally reassured herself that Mrs. Ho was right. The movie queen would resist. Yinan got angry and shouted at his wife to repeat herself. Wen calmly replied that she was filing for divorce. The guy yelled at the director to turn off the live broadcast. Only crazy people could film something like that. Out of anger, he pulled out the camera cord. Then he grabbed his wife by the shoulders and told her not to push him. It's not too late to apologize for your words. The girl, with tears in her eyes, answered that many families wanted to see her as a daughter-in-law. Many of them were much more prestigious than her current husband. She asked him if he knew why the queen of the screen chose him. Grabbing his wife by the hand, he replied that she was not talking nonsense. Ruin asked the guy why he grabbed his wife. He said menacingly that it was a family matter and there was no need to interfere. Wen continued that the day she left the theater and a drunk man tried to hit on her, Yinan came over and fought back. That's why she married him. The girl liked the courage and fearlessness of the defender. But she did not think that those fists that protected the queen of the screen. Over time, they will beat her. Mr. Yinan was beside himself with anger. He shouted even louder at his wife and said that she was his woman. Therefore, she should obey her husband. At this time, Han's assistant sent her a message. It was not possible to find out what exactly happened. But a video of the attack and rape of the Screen Queen appeared on one of the banned porn sites. The voice in the video was doctored, but most likely belonged to her husband Ma Yinan. Ruan was shocked by the message. The ugliness of this bastard exceeded her imagination. Then our heroine sent her assistant a video in which the Screen Queen's husband confesses to domestic violence. She asked that it be published on the website, and that the police be informed about it. Inan swung at his wife and asked her that she had had enough. Han grabbed his hand and asked what the daily life of a rich and beautiful girl was. The guy ducked in fear that our heroine would beat him again and did not understand her question. Lee screamed that she knew this nickname, but did not remember where she heard it. Ma got angry. How could she know? After all, it was banned a long time ago. Again a cry that she remembered. The girl remembered that this account was on a popular pornographic site at the time. After the site was banned, the owner was never found by IP. She continued that there was a video of a girl who looked very much like Mrs. Ching. Although her face was very blurry, everyone present turned their attention to Lee, and Wen asked again about the girl in that video, that she was really wearing a dark blue halter dress. In response, the narrator continued that if she remembers correctly, it was this video that collected the most monetary donations. More than 10 million views. The queen of the screen turned to her husband and asked him what he had been lying to her all this time. He had sent out the so-called secret for profit, and so many viewers had watched it. Inan replied that he had not lied. He had simply covered his wife's face so that no one would know. At that moment, Ruin kicked him in the legs and the guy fell. Grabbing him by the hair, she told him to apologize. But he howled that he shouldn't apologize. All women are born to be toys for men, and toys aren't worth apologizing for. Even if our heroine tells someone, no one will believe her, because there is no evidence. Then he turned to his wife and said that he had hit her on camera. If he apologized, everything would go back to normal. He was sure that Wen would not leave him. Mrs. Ching replied that there was no way back. At this time, Kim's voice came from the offender's phone, saying that all the evidence had been recorded. Inan angrily asked him why he didn't hang up. Ruin walked up to him and said that his good days were over. The police arrived and shouted through a megaphone who Ma Yinan was. They received a report that he was engaged in domestic violence and distribution of obscene materials. The guy tried to run away, but our heroine caught up with him at the door and knocked him to the floor. He fell right in front of the policeman, who invited him to follow them. The police took Yinan away. The queen of the screen thanked our heroine for saving her, but she denied it and said that it was not her merit. Wen saved herself. Li was confused. She didn't believe that it was actually Wen Qing. Then she finally came to her senses. She apologized to her, saying that she didn't know that she was in that video. But the interlocutor thanked the girl for opening her eyes. Mr. Ho approached his wife and said that he had ordered the film crew to stop recording the rest of the program. He suggested that they go home and rest, and she agreed. Han approached the queen of the screen and suggested that they return home. She suggested that if she needed help in the future, Wen could always contact her. Li said goodbye to Mrs. Qin and said that Ma Yinan was indeed a very scary person. Girls should not fall in love with such men. Otherwise, the consequences will be very scary. Xiao's girlfriend thought that he continued to write stalker messages even after they started dating. Then she turned around and slapped her lover in the face. She said she wanted to break up with him because he was a scumbag and wrote to other girls even after the couple started living together. Xiao tried to justify himself, saying that he could explain everything. But the girl insisted that he was a scumbag and that he should get the hell out. Li got angry, packed her things and left, and her brother ran after her and tried to catch up with her. He asked for forgiveness and said that he could explain everything. Wei watched what was happening and was glad that fortunately she was not caught this time and Ruin was lucky. Wen posted online that the incident haunted her. She admitted that she had been subjected to domestic violence since the first day of her marriage and had fought back several times. But 5 years ago, Inan drugged her, knocked her out and raped her with his friends, all recorded on camera. Since that day, her husband has constantly threatened her. Our heroine calmly drank tea in her mansion and thought about how the rumors about the scandal with Wen were slowly dying down. In a couple of days, she could invite her for a walk. Suddenly, the door opened. The beloved husband returned from work with good news. He sat down next to his wife and began to tell. The Western District Development Plan is complete. It has become a hot topic on social media, and therefore the authorities have paid attention to it. They are going to hold elections. Han was very happy because their efforts were not in vain. Mr. Ho smiled and replied that all the credit goes to his wife. Khan said that now her husband should prepare for the elections. Our hero agreed and thanked his beloved for being by his side. He admitted that he was selfish. That's why he would never let his wife leave him. The girl replied that she would always be there. The young people started kissing, but they heard the footsteps of their younger sisters and brothers behind them. So they decided that the children should not watch this. In Gu's mansion, the owner said that he had no appetite. When people voted on the internet for the development of the Western region, he did not understand what to do. Wei promised to think of something. The guy replied that he needed to think faster, otherwise he would leave. The girl exclaimed that she had an idea. They should donate money to the poor families of the Eastern District. But Zhao objected that there were no poor people in the district. It was not like the Western one. Then the young lady said that we should pretend that they exist. Repeat after her sister. If they donate essential items, they will increase their reputation among the residents. And this will be their trump card. People will want to support the Eastern region. Mr. Gu agreed and assigned the girl to do this. He said that he knew from the start that she was the person he needed. The girl asked for a reward after she finished. The young man handed over the card and said that he could use the money if he wanted to buy something for himself. Then he thought. The girl hugged him. Zhao asked Wei to do all this before the election and she agreed. Our heroine told her assistant that this time they delivered things and food to an orphanage and poor families in the Western region. The girl said that new clothes would be delivered tomorrow, and she asked the boss why she herself came to buy things for the orphanage this time. Miss Ho replied that there had been problems with supplies last time, and now she wanted to check everything herself. The subordinate insisted that there was no need to be so zealous. They would take care of everything themselves, because no one would see that the mistress was trying so hard. Ruin said to be more careful and not to buy goods from that store anymore. They are of poor quality and unsuitable for use. Especially food. There are many expired products there. Two guys were talking to each other that Wei had allowed the car to be sent. But one of them was indignant that the products there were bad. Mrs. Ho showed her subordinate the store where you can't buy food. She suggested telling the guys that the products are bad. The girls approached the truck and asked if these were donation items. The guys nodded affirmatively, and our heroine continued that the products were of terrible quality. The food is not up to standard, so it is easy to get into trouble with this kind of donation. The guy replied that it had nothing to do with her. But Ruin insisted that they had to think about the people who would then cook them. The suppliers would be held responsible if anything happened to them. One of the guys responded rudely that people should be grateful that they are given food for free, and Khan should get lost. But the second guy recognized our heroine. A woman watching the event did not hear the conversation and asked what she was forbidding to donate. The girl replied that she was afraid that their glory would be stolen. Mrs. Ho took the keys out of her purse and opened the box, and rice and dirt spilled out. She screamed that the goods were of poor quality and would cause serious problems if used. The guy replied that our heroine was lying. Ruin asked if she had given him some rice from the box to try. Would he have eaten it? The young man replied that the rice was just a little dirty and actually needed to be washed. Other people also wanted to do good. He shouted to his partner that they needed to go. The girls walked away from them, and Mrs. Ho told her assistant to find out who the car belonged to. Wei posted online that she was going to donate food and essential items to economically disadvantaged homes in the Western District next week. Under her post, they posted a video of the incident between Khan and the guys. But the sister tried to protect our heroine. Mr. Ho's brother turned to his sister-in-law and asked if she had seen what his sister had written. After all, her goods were of poor quality, and she was defiling the Ho family. Ruin calmly replied that the assistant's help was not needed. The brother insisted that these people did not know what was good and what was bad. But our heroine replied that she could not live peacefully knowing that the goods of this quality will be delivered to people who are barely surviving anyway. She gave her brother the card and asked him to transfer the money to Mr. Gu's hospital account balance. She would contact them later. The boy did not understand her actions, but Khan said that if someone suffered because of her wayward sister, he could be used for treatment. Looking at the guy, she continued that she knew what he was thinking about. A string is for the weak, bad luck is for the unfortunate, a life of suffering is for the poor, Buddhism is for the rich. Then she took a cup of tea, sat down on the sofa, and asked if the guy really didn't trust his daughter-in-law and hadn't seen anything like that. Wei got out of the car in the Eastern District. She told them to hurry up, she had a beautician appointment after lunch. She thought that her sister should have been hounded on the internet for trying to interfere. The girl was proud that she was being portrayed as a hero. After she sacrificed everything she had bought, the Gu family's good reputation would definitely spread throughout the entire eastern region. When handing out aid, the benefactor said that there were lunch boxes, rice noodles, and winter clothes. Come and pick them up. Wei watched this and laughed. She said that there was no hurry. Everyone would get their share. People rode everything that came to hand. Suddenly, an ambulance pulled up and our heroine got out. The sister was shocked by what she saw and asked what she was doing there. Khan replied that she was afraid that something would happen to people because of this charity food. So she called a medical team. Wei didn't understand what was going on and asked if there was something wrong with the lunchbox. Suddenly, the man fell down and called for help, saying that his stomach hurt. Khan ordered that the poisoned man be examined by doctors. The doctor and an assistant with a suitcase of medicines rushed to help. Miss Ho took the food box, opened it, and realized that some of the food had gone bad. The victim's friends shouted that he had been poisoned. This is all very disgusting. If you don't want to spend money on normal food, then it's better not to donate. Wei didn't understand what was going on. The assistant explained that she had given the order to buy the lowest quality food, and she had screamed that everything needed to be cleaned up immediately. The subordinate tried to calm everyone down, saying that it was hot now, and therefore it was normal that the products had spoiled a little. But people shouted that it was all hypocritical. Why is she so nervous? After all, she did something bad and now she forces everyone to keep quiet. But Wei replied that she was sacrificing food and clothes, and they were still sorting through. Those present have arms and legs. They can earn money themselves. They ask at someone else's expense and still have the conscience to complain. Mrs. Ho came up and said that many people ate spoiled food. And what if something bad happens to them too? After all, it doesn't matter whether the food spoiled in the heat or was like that from the start. You can find out by sending it in for testing. Wei was very angry with her sister and told her not to bother her. She would figure it out herself. But our heroine said that she was just warning her. The girl was very angry with Ruin and did not understand why she was sticking her nose into other people's business. If she got her hands on the box of food, it would all be over. Wei ordered a subordinate to get behind the wheel and smash the entire lunchbox counter and disperse the crowd. The guy didn't agree, but she began to threaten to fire him, and if he does agree, he will get 2 million. She said to do it all as quickly as possible. Mrs. Ho carried the bag of missing food in her hands and thought that her sister needed to pray for everything to be okay. If there was something wrong with the food, she wouldn't let her go. People ran away in fear. The car was out of control. The driver shouted to get out of the way. The brakes were broken. Our heroine was walking and a car was driving towards her. At that moment, she thought that her sister was getting rid of evidence. The driver screamed away and then he hit Khan and she fell. Mrs. Ho yelled at Wei that she was crazy for ordering the car to be driven into the crowd. But the girl did not admit to what she had done. Then she started screaming that she had always been better than Ruin, and that she always pushed her sister down. Our heroine's life should belong to her, and now Mrs. Ho is trying to ruin her life with her accusations. She asked why she was doing this.